Hey guys, so as many of you guys may be aware, it has almost been an entire year since I released my very first story video back in 2017, and since then I have done numerous other stories about everybody's favorite troops inside of the Clash of Clans universe. And as a bit of a one-year anniversary for this story series, I wanted to put together a compilation of every single story I have done since last year. I hope you guys do enjoy, and maybe you'll even see a story in here that you may have missed at some point during the year. Anyway, let me know down below which one of these is your favorite, and anyways, I will talk to you guys all later. Peace out.
For nearly 4 years, the Barbarian King has been one of the fiercest troops within the game Clash of Clans. Alongside his queen, they are quite the power couple. But how did these two come to be? Today, I'm going to tell you the story of how the Barbarian became the Barbarian King. Let's start way back at the beginning, back in 2013. On January the 10th, 2013, it was just a regular day in the Clash village, where troops were going about their daily lives. Barbarians and hogs were having arm wrestles, archers having shooting contests, giants boxing, goblins stealing, and builders building. It was another average day in the village. Until two barbarians came across an abandoned balloon and decided to take it for a trip. The two barbarians got into the balloon and set off. They went whichever way the wind would blow them. After sailing for almost an hour, they both got very thirsty and realized that there was only one small container of water. One of the barbarians, whose name was Barbear, decided to be selfish and drink almost 3/4 of the water, and only giving his friend Ian 1/4. Ian wasn't too happy about this, but didn't faze him too much since he didn't want to start a fight with him, mainly because Barbear was bigger than Ian and would most likely kick his butt if they ever fought. Anyways, shortly after, they came across a new island. This island is not to be confused with other islands that have recently been discovered. There was no master builder or battle machine on this one, and when they sat down, they took a quick look around and found that the place was empty, and they were the only ones there. Then after a bit more exploring, at the center of the island, they found something brand new that they had never seen before. They found a small waterfall and a small lake filled with a black liquid. Ian, who was dying of thirst since Barbear didn't share much with him, didn't care that it was black and just dove in and took a big gulp. After satisfying his thirst, he got out to rejoin his friend. Barbear also tried a small sip of the black liquid, but not too much since he was still a bit full from the water that he drank earlier. Ian thought it would be a good idea to refill their small container with some of the mysterious black liquid, just in case they got thirsty again. They didn't have too much time to examine the black liquid or any more of the island, because as Ian was getting out of the small lake, some storm clouds began to form above them. So they rushed back to their balloon and set flight back home. As they started flying off, the storm began to get worse. Wind started blowing them back and forth, rain was pouring down, and lightning was striking all around them. The storm was like nothing they'd ever seen before. The barbarians thought to themselves that the wizards must have finally finished upgrading that lightning spell. But then all of a sudden, a bolt of lightning came and struck the balloon, sending electricity through both of the barbarians' bodies. The jolt of electricity ended up sending Barbear overboard, and he fell into the ocean, badly injuring himself, unsure of whether or not he would be able to swim to shore. And then the electricity ended up knocking Ian unconscious, and he fell asleep. When Ian woke back up, he realized that the balloon had carried him all the way back home. He had to go tell everyone what happened. He grabbed his sword and the container of black liquid, and ran off towards the town hall. As he ran through the village, he got weird looks from everyone, but he ignored them. When he made it to the town hall, he began telling his story, but got cut off halfway through when the wizard asked him, "Who exactly are you?" Ian, who was extremely confused, told them, "It's me, Ian." Then he caught a glimpse of himself in a mirror. He looked nothing like he used to. He stood almost 3 feet taller and was as big as a giant. Not to mention, he outgrew his clothes and was standing in the middle of the town hall butt naked. After covering himself up, he told everyone what happened and showed them the black liquid. The wizard suggested that the lightning had a reaction with the black liquid and made him bigger and stronger, and that he should use his newfound powers to help the village within the next battle. The next day, they went into battle. It was an all-out attack using tons of each troop. All around him, barbarians were getting smashed left and right, but when he started being targeted, he didn't die. He was able to soak way more damage than any other barbarian. Then when the battle had ended, when all the troops turned back into elixir, he just stood there, waiting for himself to turn into elixir too. But he never did. So he decided to head back to the village. The wizard was shocked to see him again and figured that along with super strength and health, he was also immortal now. So as the days went on, he would go and fight more battles. and come back each and every time. He had won their village many battles, and to thank him for his contribution, they built him an altar, where he could regain his strength by sleeping there. Then one day, a builder discovered a black liquid supply underneath the village, and built a drill to help dig it all up. It was the same black liquid as the one Ian had drank before, and they decided to finally name this liquid. They decided to call it Dark Elixir. To thank Ian some more, they gave him some dark elixir, and Ian drank it all and then fell into a really deep slumber. He did not wake up for nearly a day, and when he finally did wake up, everyone noticed that he grew a little bit, and he felt a little bit stronger. The villagers thought that if they kept feeding him this, then he could keep growing and become unstoppable. So they started farming dark elixir and stealing it from other villages. And after feeding him the dark elixir 3 more times, he developed a new superpower. When in battle, he could burst out into a rage and summon some mini Ians to fight alongside him. Ian was so powerful and so strong that every base he attacked, he was victorious. The village decided to crown him king. After all he did for the village, they gave him his crown. And to this day, he continues to fight alongside the villagers and defend them from other invasions. He was the village's only savior, and their only hero. At least he was, until she came along. But that's a story for another time. Right after Barber fell into the water, he slowly began sinking to the bottom of the ocean. But as he sank closer and closer towards the bottom, a heal spell dropped out of nowhere. Then another, and another. There must have been at least 35 heal spells sent from villages all around the world. Heal spell after heal spell started falling all around him. The heal spells combined to heal all of his wounds. He could now also hold his breath for an incredibly long time. Either that or he always could hold it for that long. Feeling extremely grateful, Barber was determined to not waste his second chance. Although he did have a very long and important road ahead of him, Barber was destined to be something much greater. Barber's story was just getting started. As he regained his strength on the ocean's floor, he realized that he had dropped his sword when he was shocked by the lightning and fell from the balloon. So without his sword, he started heading towards the nearest land, which just so happened to be the one next to the one that he came from. Except it was the island right next to it. When he reached the island, he met an older looking fellow who called himself Jeff. When Barber tried to respond, he realized that he couldn't. The lightning shock must have caused him to be unable to speak. This made him quite upset and angry, but he still tried his best to explain with gestures what had happened. Jeff seemed to understand what he meant, and Jeff explained his problems to Barber. Jeff was getting old and weak, so was unable to do much physical activities, so he asked Barber for his assistance. Barber, not being able to speak, just shrugged yes and helped Jeff with all the heavy lifting and physical parts of his jobs. Time seemed to go by extremely quickly on this village for some reason, because in what felt like a few days, they were able to construct almost an entire mini village. With all of Jeff's amazing designs, you could consider him to be the master builder. If only he weren't so weak and old. As time progressed, Barber ended up helping Jeff create his best creation yet. Together, they created an exosuit for Jeff that they called the Battle Machine. The exosuit gave Jeff more strength and also had a feature where he could use lightning to give him more energy. Then once he got out of the suit, the lightning's energy would be inside of him, and he could continue building all on his own. So since the master builder could now support himself, Barber thought it would be time to head back to his village. What felt like a few weeks to Barber was in reality actually 4 years. But before Barber could leave, the master builder had a surprise for him. The master builder had built a statue of Barber as a way to say thank you for all his help. Barber, who still couldn't speak, smiled and then ran into the water. He ran all the way to his village, but when he got there, he saw something that he's never seen before. He saw the biggest barbarian he'd ever seen in his life, and it looked like his long-lost friend, Ian. Barber tried to go say hi to him, but apparently Ian was a very popular guy. So Barber pushed himself through the crowd, and once he got to the front, he tried to speak. But of course, he still couldn't from the lightning. So instead, what came out was a little squeal. Everyone started laughing at him. So Barber felt sad and went to go sit down by the beach. The wizard and Hog Rider felt bad for him, so they went over to try and keep him company. While they were just sitting there, the Hog Rider asked,
"Hey guys, you ever wonder what's across the water?"
I wonder how we get over there.
The barbarian already knew what was out there and really wanted to tell them, but couldn't because he was now mute. So instead, he ran off into the ocean, hoping that they would follow him. He ran all the way to the village and never looked back. The wizard and Hog Rider decided to take a boat there instead. By the time Barber got to the island, the wizard and Hog Rider had already beat him there. Except when Barbar found them, he saw that they turned into elixir and dark elixir. Barbar was furious that the only troops that were being nice to him had died. He had a quick rage where he started smashing things. He ran into a tree and smashed it to pieces. After about 4 seconds, his rage died down, and he picked up a stick that he broke from the tree, which he later decided to turn into an axe to replace his sword. Barbar ended up deciding to stay with the Master Builder, since everyone back home was laughing at him. So for a little bit, it was just Barbar and the Master Builder on the island. Until one day, an invisible archer showed up. She was a pretty sneaky archer, and curious where she came from, she told them her story. Not long after the mighty barbarian king had made his presence known in the village, he shared his story on how he became so big and powerful. The alchemists from the laboratory paid very close attention and wished to replicate this on other troops. So for months they performed tests on almost every single troop within the village. They would take 2 of each troop, feed one a lot of dark elixir, and then the other one just a few sips. Then they attempted to electrocute them to get the same reaction as that had happened with the barbarian king. Sadly, they had no success. Hundreds of innocent troops' lives have been lost in an attempt to create another super troop or hero. But don't get too angry about this, because it's not murder or anything like that. Because after each troop died, they turned into elixir. Then they would take that elixir and go train a troop again. This went on for about 3 months, and during that time the village progressed so much that it was able to upgrade its town hall all the way to Town Hall 9. And shortly after the town hall was finished being upgraded, the alchemists tried an experiment on the archers. There were 2 archers named Ark and Her. They gave Ark a whole bottle of dark elixir, and Her got a small sip. They went through the exact same process of being electrocuted, then both fell to the floor. The alchemists were disappointed in another failure and decided to call it a day, so they locked up the laboratory and left. But what they didn't know was that the archers hadn't died, since they didn't turn into elixir. They simply fainted from the shock. They were each wearing their special friendship bracelets that were made out of gold that they got from the gold mine, and the gold was able to conduct most of the electricity from the shock. So both archers got up and quickly realized that they were locked in a pitch black room inside of the lab. At first they freaked out, but to pass time they took turns telling each other stories about how much fun it would be to create an arena where they could just battle against other kingdoms, just troops versus other troops, and they could call it something like Clash Rumbles or Clash Battles. But before they could figure out a better name for it, the door to the lab bursted open and light shined in on them. The archers were so happy to see daylight again that they ran right past the alchemists into the open. The alchemists were incredibly confused and wondering what just happened. Then they turned around and saw 2 archers, but then they disappeared. And then they were there again. They were sort of flickering as if they were there and then not. Not only were the alchemists shocked, but the archers were too. This was the first time that they were seeing themselves as well. And Ark, the archer that drank more of the dark elixir, was almost 3 times the size of a regular archer. But then one of the alchemists screamed, and everyone else screamed too. Everyone was scared of the archers, but the archers claimed that they weren't ghosts. So the troops were not sure, and they decided to capture the 2 archers and they took them to the king for him to decide. He could either have them killed for being ghosts and possibly being evil, or he could set them free and maybe use their powers for something good. The king couldn't decide on his own, so he decided to put it to a vote. He asked all of the villagers and nearby villages for their opinions, and he said that by the same time next week, he will tally the votes and decide. A week later, after counting all of the votes, it was determined that the archers would not be killed. They figured that ghosts really aren't that scary, especially considering that they have dragons, giant metal robots, and rock golems roaming all around the place. So even if they were ghosts, it wouldn't actually be that scary. Since they decided to let the archers live, they still wanted to figure out why they were sometimes turning invisible and sometimes not. So the alchemists took a look and realized that their experiment had actually worked. However, not in the way that they expected. It turns out that they had different abilities compared to the barbarian king, Ian. So since Ian was the only one who had been through this before, he wanted to help Ark and Her to master their abilities and teach them to use it properly. So the next few weeks they trained all day, every day. They found that they didn't have the same ability as Ian the Barbarian King. Rather than raging and spawning barbarians, they were both able to turn invisible for a few seconds, where no one could detect them. They could turn invisible on command, but them staying invisible ate up a lot of energy, and would take a while before they could do it again. Ark also seemed to be much better at this than Her was. Plus, Ark seemed to have the ability to do even more than Her. She could regenerate her health, spawn more mini archers, and do way more damage. Even Ian was impressed with what she could do. He was really impressed by Ark, and after a full day of training, the three of them decided to go out for something to drink at the Clash Tavern, where they each ordered a round of elixir. But Ian, being the king of the village, got a special bottle of dark elixir instead. While they were all enjoying themselves, Ian ended up talking to the village chief, and the chief was mentioning something about how, now that the village is getting bigger and stronger, he may need a queen to help him rule the village. Ian thought this was a really silly idea, but it also rested in the back of his mind, knowing very well that it was also true. The next day at training, both of the archers had pretty much mastered their new abilities. Then at the end of their training, he declared that their training has come to an end, and that it was up to them to use their abilities for the greater good of the village. And then the next day, they entered into their first battle since becoming these new super troops. During the battle, Ark absolutely dominated and helped carry her team to the 3-star, whereas her wasn't even deployed because the chief must have forgotten about her. And like the Barbarian King, Ark was also immortal and was able to be used in the next battle after a short rest. Ark was praised around the village and everyone adored her. After everyone was finished congratulating Ark on a great battle, Ian approached her and asked her to be his new queen. So Ian proposed, and then Ark replied with a gleeful yes. And their wedding was set to happen the next day. Everyone was excited, except for her, since she was jealous of Ark for being stronger and having more powers, and for getting to marry the king of the village. Although she was jealous, she was also Ark's best friend, so she wanted to be there to support her. So on the day of their wedding, they each went through their vows, and when it came time for Ian's speech, he said, "Thank you all very much for being here. Now that we are happily married, together we will rule this kingdom, and she will assist me in getting many more 3-stars for this village. We both swear that we will defend this village with our lives, and to lead our troops into battle. This day marks a new age in our village, and things will never be the same again." And he was right. Things were definitely going to change, hopefully for the better. After the wedding, Her went to go congratulate the two on their marriage, and Ark was so happy to see her. Ark said, "Thank you so much. I honestly don't know what I would do without my best friend. You're the best." And as days passed, Ark and Ian were still happily married and continued to be the backbone of all of their attacks, and also helping out on defense. They truly were the heroes of the village, and were irreplaceable. And Her usually stayed back at the village since she wasn't immortal like Ark. So Ark kept her at home to protect her from any dangers. And as days went by and months passed, the new Archer Queen kept getting stronger and stronger, until eventually she was even stronger than the Barbarian King, and Ian was not happy about that. In fact, he felt a bit threatened, that people might like her more than him. So he had to do something about that. Something that could ruin her. Something that could make people hate her. Something that is so diabolically evil and crazy that it has to be told in the next story. Not long after Ian and Ark had gotten married, they both continued to be the village's favorite troops. They would stomp on just about every base they would attack, so obviously the village continued to use all of their available dark elixir to upgrade their powers even more. And as the days went on, the village kept farming dark elixir. But it seemed that the villagers had chosen a favorite hero. In battles, people were choosing to use healers to keep the queen alive, but they would just send the Barbarian King as a sacrifice. Now obviously the two heroes were immortal, so it didn't matter too much. However, the Barbarian King was pretty upset that no one liked him as much. He also felt that since he was the first hero, he deserved most of the love from the villagers. But that clearly wasn't the case, because not only were people doing queen walks and never king walks, they were also leveling the queen and ignoring the king. This was really starting to get the Barbarian King frustrated, but he didn't do anything. He just kept trying his best in battles and did his best to get through each day, living in the Archer Queen's shadow. But then one day, the entire village came bearing gifts for the royals, as a way to say thank you for all of their help in battles and on defense. So first they brought the king a new metal glove that can be used for extra protection in battle. Ian said his thank yous, and then they moved on to the Archer Queen's gift. They handed her a brand new creation. It was a miniature Expo variant created by the master builder himself. This mini Expo was the most powerful weapon in the village and could destroy most buildings in only a few hits. So the queen, who was ecstatic, said thank you and then went to go test it out. After seeing what the queen had gotten, Ian felt super betrayed that they would give her a super cool gift, but then he only got a new metal glove. He was also already feeling pretty down that everyone liked the queen more than him, but this was the last straw. He was sick and tired of being second to the queen, so he decided that it was time for him to do something. He knew that he couldn't do anything directly to the queen, since she was stronger than him, And besides, everyone would probably know this, so he had to think of something that could indirectly affect her. And then it hit him. He quickly got to work and took a quick visit to the alchemist. The wizards handed over a grey vial and told the king that this spell hasn't been released yet, we are still working on it, and we aren't sure of the side effects yet. But it's supposed to knock out whichever troop you use it on, and they shouldn't wake up for at least a week. We call it the sleep spell. So Ian grabbed the spell and also snagged a heal spell while he was at it. And then he did something sinister. He went to find the Archer Queen's best friend and then used the sleep potion on her. She instantly passed out and began snoring. He then picked her up and took her to the beach. There he saw a barbarian, hog rider, and wizard sitting down, talking about what they think was out beyond the horizon. That gave him an idea. He took the sleeping archer to a secret boat and put the archer down in the cabin area, and laid the heal spell down right next to her. And then he got out and pushed the boat out towards the hog rider and wizard. After that, they were never seen in the village again. The Archer Queen began freaking out that her best friend had disappeared, and it was really starting to affect her mental state. Some raids, she would be so distracted that she would start targeting walls, even when there was a really obvious building nearby. You could almost say that her new favorite target was the wall. People started getting really frustrated at her, so Ian felt like he had successfully achieved what he wanted. But back to the boat. There was a really bad storm that caused the boat to crash into a mysterious island. Unfortunately, the hog rider and wizard did not make it. But lucky for the archer, the heal spell bottle broke and healed her from her injuries, keeping her alive when the boat crashed. So when the sleep spell wore off, she got out of the broken boat and explored the mysterious island. And not after long, she found two individuals in what looked like a mini village. One was a barbarian holding an axe, and the other said that he called himself the Master Builder. For almost 3 years, the Grand Warden had been absent from our villages, and not until December 10th, 2015 did he decide to finally make his return and come back to help our village. In today's video, I'm going to tell you my version of the Grand Warden's origin story. Way back in the days, before there was a barbarian king, before there were town halls, and even before there was literally anything else, the world was just a vast landscape of land and water. And one day, two immortal beings were sent into the world by the all-powerful gods known as the Lecropis. The two brothers were the very first troops ever in the village, and were blessed with incredible powers thanks to the Lecropis gods. The first brother's name was Jemine. He wore a red robe and held a book of all the most powerful spells in the universe. His brother, who was named Elixir, wore a blue cloak and held a very powerful staff capable of vaporizing just about anything. These two were pretty much the yin and yangs of the Clash universe, where one of them was the brains on the team and the other was the bronze and muscles. Together they were able to create an entire village and then using his spellbook to create other beings to coexist with them. Jemine decided to create 9 unique troops with the help of his spellbook. He created the Barbarian, the Archer, the Goblin, the Giant, the Wallbreaker, Balloon, Healer, Dragon, and the P.E.K.K.A, the very first few troops ever to enter into the village in Clash of Clans. The Wizard was also amongst all of the first troops in the game, but he was actually created in a different way, as explained in the origin story here. Then with the help of Elixir, he was able to control them and teach them how to fight for the village. The village was coming along very nicely and all was well inside of the Clash of Clans village. The army came back from attacks victorious most of the times, and their spoils of war were helping to create more and more buildings and upgrades. With all these extra resources, the two brothers also decided to create a troop dedicated to building and upgrading things in the village, just to help speed things up some more. So they created a single builder to do all of that. The builder was a fantastic at his job, and the two brothers couldn't believe that they didn't think of making a builder sooner. They ended up liking the builder so much that they wanted to make a second one as well. But once they created the second builder, he refused to work unless the brothers gave him 500 gems. And even though the brothers were incredibly powerful and had a spellbook with all known spells, there was no spell capable of duplicating gems, truly making gems the rarest resource in the village. So the brothers attempted to round up enough gems to pay the builder his extra fee. However, they could not come up with enough to pay him his 500 gems. So presented with the challenge, the brothers were determined to find a new way of duplicating gems using a brand new spell. So Jemine studied long and hard for a few days until he finally came up with a possible solution. So he grabbed one of the few gems that they had and he placed it on the ground. He then stood back and casted his spell. Unfortunately, the spell went right through the gem and split into 3 smaller bolts. Those bolts ended up hitting an army camp, a free spell, and a hidden Tesla. And then the spell ended up bringing those objects to life and turning them into 3 brand new troops. You can follow their entire story in this story right here. So Elixir took the 3 new wizards to go train them, while Jemind went back to the drawing board. He figured out where he messed up and then he switched the spell accordingly. He then picked up the gem and tried again. He casted the spell once again, and this time, it actually worked. What once was just a single gem was now 2. He then casted the spell again and again and again, until there were thousands of gems in front of him. The brother had finally found a way to cheat the system. After realizing the spell was a success, Jemind continued to create new spells to help them out even more. He created simple spells like a clone spell, and then he also created some spells that could increase his and Lexir's powers. He then later also found a way to combine his powers with Lexir's. Together they could become an even more unstoppable force, and rather than just winning most battles, they could win every single battle. So Jemind used the spell on themselves and they ended up merging together. Their cloaks combined, creating a purple cloak with a hood. He held both the staff and the spellbook. But they didn't just stop there. They created more spells to give them an aura that helps the surrounding troops around them by giving them extra health. And he even created a unique Eternal Tomb ability that could fully protect any troops within a close range around them for a certain amount of time. With all these gems and helpful spells, the village was excelling in every aspect and were making extremely quick progress. So quick, in fact, that the gods Lycropus noticed. They were watching all of this and realized that the 2 brothers could become a serious threat if they keep this stuff up. So they realized that they had to weaken them. But before they did anything, some other major event happened inside of the village. Something that forced the new Grand Warden to leave and possibly never come back. Before the Lycropus gods could do anything to nerf the Grand Warden, there was a problem within the village. Apparently the combined power between the Grand Warden and the 3 wizards were far too great and were causing mayhem in the village. Whenever they got too close, their combined power would cause a massive earthquake that would destroy absolutely everything. So the Grand Warden decided that he had to leave in order to save the village. So he then ended up leaving and using his powers elsewhere. He left the village and randomly traveled for a few days, going whichever way the wind would blow him. Then one day he finally came across some remote island. He decided this would be a good place for him to set up camp since it had pretty much everything he needed. He figured he would have to rebuild the whole village, but this time he thought to himself that he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice, and only create the builder after the village was done. So this time, trying to think ahead, he decided that the first thing he would do is create a builder. And after his experience creating the first few builders, he decided why not make this builder smarter and just overall better in every way. So when he casted the spell to create the builder, he put extra energy into it, trying to make the builder even better than the original ones. But what the Grand Warden did not realize was that when he left the village, he left behind part of himself. The main village was where he was able to draw most of his power from, and he didn't realize that. And now that he was a long ways away from home, he was not capable of casting any as powerful of spells. So his lack of power, mixed with trying to create an even better builder, ended up knocking him unconscious. Although, lucky enough, his spell ended up working and he was able to create a new, smarter builder. But the intense power from the Grand Warden's spell ended up putting the builder into a coma before he could have woken up. So for a very, very long time, the new builder and the Grand Warden just laid on their estranged island. Then finally, after some time, the Grand Warden finally wakes up. Unfortunately, the Master Builder still remains in his coma, so the Grand Warden is left to tend to him until he wakes up. While the Grand Warden was waiting for the builder to wake up, he decided to create a town hall, where he left the builder to lay. He named the building after the town hall, but instead he called it the Builder's Hall, since that was the resting place of the new builder. But after years of waiting, the builder had still not woken up, and the Grand Warden was beginning to lose hope that he ever would. So after waiting for another month, he finally decided to give up. So he left the builder in his builder hall and then took off. And as the Grand Warden traveled around, he came across some troops who said they were heading towards the Royal Arena. So since the Grand Warden had nowhere else to go, he tagged along. And when he got to the arena, in the middle of the battlefield, he saw the Ice Wizard and Electro Wizard both attacking each other. And this was a great news for the Grand Warden, because that meant that if they were both at the Clash Royale arena, then that means that they weren't back at the Clash Village. So he immediately took off back to the Clash of Clans village. And he could not have gotten back at a better time, because as he arrived, the regular builder was in the middle of releasing his brand new defense that he called the Eagle Artillery. and this thing was going to be a beast and absolutely crush entire armies at a time. So the Grand Warden was needed desperately by the villagers to help protect their armies from it. So the Grand Warden was then accepted back into the village with open arms. However, the Lycanthropist gods were not as welcoming. They still were not very happy about him running away from the village like that. So as a small tiny punishment, they ended up cursing him so that anytime he wanted to help defend the village, he would be turned to stone and wouldn't be able to run anywhere this time. So with that, everyone was happy. The villagers had a way to fight off the new OP Eagle artillery, the Lycanthropist gods got their revenge, and the Grand Warden was back at home close to his power source. Everyone was happy, but it's almost as if they were forgetting someone. Don't worry, the builder that was in the coma eventually ended up waking up in the summer of 2017 when a barbarian accidentally stumbled onto his island, as explained in the story right here. And let's just say that the Grand Warden created this builder with the expectations of being better than a regular builder, and let's just say that he didn't disappoint. These ranged units are some of the best troops in both Clash of Clans and Clash Royale. The three of them have their own unique abilities and powers, and the wizard trio are so similar, but at the same time they are quite different from each other. So what happened to cause these three brothers to take on such different abilities? Here is the story of the three wizards. Before there was a village chief, before there was a barb king or even an archer queen, and before most troops were even added into the game, there was an almighty being that had control over the Clash of Clans village. This so-called ruler of the village was a fair ruler and the rest of the villagers respected him. He was sort of a sorcerer that carried around a staff and a spellbook with him at all times. In battles, he was extremely selfless and tended to provide his army with an aura that kept them alive for longer. Overall, he was an irreplaceable asset and also a well-respected ruler. The Warden, as he liked to call himself, was about to test the strengths of his new powers by performing the most difficult spell ever attempted. He was trying to transform an object into a living person, something that only the strongest magical being could successfully do. He decided to try it on a gem, because that was the most valuable object in the village, and if he was successful, this new being could be almost as powerful as him, if done correctly. So the Warden places the gem on the ground and then stands back and casts the spell. A beam of light shoots out of his staff and travels straight towards the gem. Once the light hits the gem, it reflects through the gem just like a crystal, and from the gem emerges three smaller beams of light. The first beam of light hits the fire at the nearby army camp, the second beam hits a hidden Tesla, and the third travels straight towards the spell factory and hits a bottle of freeze spell. All three objects begin to smoke and transform into human-looking forms. Then, once the transformation's finished, three mini wardens were standing in front of him. One wore a red cloak and for some reason had a giant afro. Another had a light blue jacket and snow white hair. The last wore a dark blue jacket and looked sort of crazy. The power from the beam of light must have been weakened when it split into three, then forging into whatever object it hit, resulting in three versions of the Warden. The Warden was glad that his spell worked, but he also didn't know what to do with these new troops. The Warden was also curious if his powers transferred over to his kids, so he asked them, "So, do you guys have any sorts of powers?" Then each of the mini wardens shot out a spell out of their fingertips. The red one shot a fireball, the blue one shot a deadly snowball, and the dark blue one shot straight electricity. The Grand Warden was actually really impressed, and was thinking that him and his three new wizards are going to destroy so many bases together when they attack. Just like one big happy family. They all came in for a big group hug, but once they touched, the ground started shaking, and then it got more and more violent. Spell bottles started breaking, troops started screaming, and buildings started crumbling. The wizards and warden immediately backed up, and then everything stopped shaking. They looked around and they could see their entire village in ruins. Everything has been destroyed. The warden conspires that their combined power is too great, and if all their power is in one spot, it can cause great damage to the people and things around them. So he suggests that they should all split up. He then says that he will volunteer to leave since his power was the strongest, and it wouldn't be fair to have 3 people leave when one person could just leave. So the Grand Warden packs his stuff and goes on his way. Together, the 3 wizards weren't powerful enough to cause any more earthquakes, but they still had the power to cast spells and the like. One day, the Red Wizard was walking through the village and he came across an old book. He opened it up and he then realized what it was. It was the Grand Warden's spellbook. He took it back to show the Ice Wizard and the Electro Wizard what he found, but before he could tell them, he found a note from the Ice Wizard sitting on the floor. It said, I am sorry, but I need to leave. The weather is too warm here and I don't know how much more of it I can take. I am going to the Clash Royale arena where I heard that they have a new snow arena called Frozen Peak. P.S. Elixir Wizard is tagging along with me. I don't know why, but he's sort of crazy and I don't want to ask. P.P.S. I'll come back to visit sometime around Christmas for about a week. So the wizard put down the note and continued reading the Ground Warden's book. And over time he learned lots of things from it. He was able to brew new spells for the village and potions to upgrade other troops' attacks and health. He also later became one of the favorite troops in the village, and then one day, 4 years later, the Grand Warden came back, when word had finally gotten to him that the Ice Wizard and Electro Wizard had left. Now he was here to stay for good, and especially because there was a new defense that had just been created by the builder, called the Eagle Artillery, and the village was going to need all the help they could get taking that down. The newest addition to the Clash Royale card collection is the new powerful male archer known as the Magic Archer. His description is stated as follows: not quite a wizard nor an archer, he shoots a magic arrow that passes through and damages all enemies in its path. It's not a trick, it's magic. So based off of this, here is the Magic Archer's origin story and how he was created and how he made it to the Clash Royale arena. One day, back in the Clash of Clans village, a young wizard named Mark was born. However, unlike the rest of the wizards in the village, this wizard was different from the others. It wasn't obvious to everyone yet, but they were soon to find out just what set him apart. But despite all of that, he grew up and was raised just like any other wizard. But then once all of the young wizards began to start training for battle, Mark felt a bit out of place. It all started that morning when Mark was walking over to the barracks to begin his training. And on the way there, he noticed two archers playing some shooting game where they were calling in their shots and then hitting them, even though that they should have been impossible. Mark couldn't believe what he was seeing and thought that this was the coolest thing that he'd ever seen in his life. And as he kept walking, he couldn't stop thinking about how on earth they were hitting those shots. But alas, once he got to the barracks, he stopped to listen to what his instructor had to say. The instructor began telling them that the secret to wizardry magic is to focus on one thing and only one thing, and then channel that energy through your fingertips. He told them to start focusing on an element such as fire, ice, or electricity, as those are the easiest to summon, and no wizard had successfully summoned any other elements other than fire, ice, and electricity before. So most wizards ended up casting fireballs, and then a few of them shot out ice shards out of their fingertips, and then a few of the really crazy ones had electricity flying out of their fingers. Mark tried really hard but was just completely unable to summon any of the three elements. He tried over and over again, but still nothing happened. The instructor came over to him and kept trying to teach him to summon something, but after trying for a few hours, the instructor finally gave up and told Mark that he was a lost cause. Then he and the other wizards got up and left. Mark was extremely upset and mad at the instructor, so he went down to the beach to cool off. And as he was sitting there, the master builder, who was just about to head back to his island since he was done gearing up an archer tower, saw him sitting by himself and went over to him. He could see that the young wizard was upset and he politely asked what was the matter. Mark then explained that he was the worst wizard ever and couldn't do any magic at all. Then after a short pause, through tears, he said, "I wish I could have just been born an archer." Then the master builder felt awful for the young wizard and told him to wait where he was. The young wizard didn't think much of it, but decided to wait anyways since he had nothing else to do. Then a bit later that night, the master builder returned with something in his hand. He held a glowing turquoise bow that just radiated energy. The master builder handed him the bow and his eyes lit up. And when I say they lit up, I literally mean that they began to glow. Mark was super pumped to be given a bow, but he noticed that it didn't have any arrows to shoot. So he asked the master builder what he was going to shoot without any arrows. To this, the master builder looked at him and said, "Well, you're a wizard, aren't you? So use your magic." Then the master builder gathered his hammer and took his little towboat back to the village. And even though Mark had just spent the whole day not able to summon any magic at all, he decided to give it one last shot. So he went over to the trees where he could focus better, and then he started focusing extremely hard on what he wanted most. And to his surprise, a small ball of energy formed in his hand. Then without hesitating, he took that ball of energy and turned it into an arrow. He notched the arrow and then fired a random shot. The arrow, made out of pure energy, went straight through everything it hit, and it never stopped or slowed down. It went all the way around the world until it came full circle and came right back to him. He willed the arrow to stop, and then he looked down at his hands, not believing what he just did. Mark had become the first magical archer. The next day at training, Mark showed off his new powers in front of the other wizards and his instructor. Everyone was super impressed, and then the instructor came over to Mark and announced, See, I knew you could do it. I taught you very well. Then he began bragging to everyone else that he was the one who taught him how to do that. But Mark didn't want to have any part of that crap, so he decided it would be best for him to leave. So, he went to the only other place where his kind could go, to the Clash Royale arena. Thanks. Whatever happened to our beloved Hog Rider captain, and the mute wizard who never spoke after the first commercial, and the barbarian who trekked his way all the way across the bottom of the ocean just to find a new island? Here is the story of what happened to our brave sailors. Shortly after spotting land, the Hog Rider and his crew were minutes away from the shores of the new island. As they made their way to the island, a raging storm began to brew, creating waves the size of giants and hitting harder than a P.E.K.K.A. The waves came down hard and crashed the boat against the rocky shoreline. Sadly, there were no survivors. Our heroes were gone. Except for one fearsome warrior, the barbarian. The barbarian comes running out of the water to find his friends turned to elixir. Before exploring the island, he runs off back into the ocean, sprinting all the way back to the village. He tells them what happened. The whole village is shocked, but they were also very intrigued by this new island and wish to journey back to finish what the wizard and Hog Rider had started. However, they had no boat. Then, as if by some miracle, the remains of the broken boat had been swept back to their shores. The builders went and got a yellow bottle from a nearby building and dropped a heal spell atop the shipwreck and set sail for the new island. As the villagers were so eager to see the new island, they forgot the barbarian. He began his second trip underwater all the way to the new island. However, when he got there, his friends had already left. The barbarian is greeted by a master builder and offers to take him in. The barbarian, furious at his friends for leaving him, he begins to get anger management problems, and to this day is told to fight with uncontrollable rage. And that is the story of why the barbarian rages during every single battle, and also how the Hog Rider and Wizard died a tragic death. Lucky for us though, we've got plenty more of them back home. A few days ago, the most important yet underrated troop in the game vanished from our villages, and everyone has been wondering two major questions. So today, I am going to tell you the story that answers both of those questions. Why did the builder leave us, and where did the builder go? So without any warning, a few days ago, our beloved builders decided it was finally time to take a hard-earned vacation. He was very tired from working non-stop for 5 years, sometimes upgrading defenses back to back to back, and not getting the chance to sleep for up to 14 days. So without warning one day, he decided to pack up his stuff and leave. So he put his hammer in his bag and took off. He decided to take the fastest way to where he wanted to go, and that was by Springtrap. Although the Springtrap was the quickest way out, it was not the safest or most reliable. Where he initially intended to go to Heyday, where he could get away from all the fighting and destroying, but the Springtrap ended up flinging him all the way to the Clash Royale arena. Unfortunately, he ended up landing in the middle of an ongoing battle, where troops and builders were getting destroyed left and right. But thankfully, after only 3 minutes, the battle ended. The builder needed to get out of there right away, so he confronted the king. He asked him where he was and how he could get home. And to that, the king replied, "You are in Clash Royale, in the arena Spell Valley, and everyone in this arena is required to fight." The king went on to tell him, "I will send you home after you have helped us get into the next arena, the Royal Arena." Obviously, the builder was not fond of the idea of fighting, so he decided to offer something else instead. He asked the king if he could help them get into the next arena, but not by fighting. The king was confused, but decided to allow it. So the builder got to work doing what he loved doing best, building things. In a matter of less than a day, he whipped up an entire arena, made from turning gears and lots of wood. He decided to call it the Builder's Workshop, which would be unlocked between Spell Valley and Royal Arena. The king, who was very pleased by this, since the builder kept his word, technically he did get them into the next arena. So the king told the builder he was free to take one of their balloons back to his village. But surprisingly, the builder refused. He said that he actually enjoyed it here and wanted to stay and build more stuff. So the king granted him his wish, and after seeing what he was capable of, decided to give him any necessary supplies he needed for his projects, but he also had one other condition, and that was that he had to do all of the maintenance on the arenas. So the builder spent his nights creating new inventions and his days maintaining the battlefield, which mostly consisted of mowing the lawn, lots and lots of cutting the grass. But the builder didn't mind too much, since no one was destroying any of his buildings. Sure, they were destroying the towers, but at least they weren't destroying his entire arena that he just built. So during his nights, he would work on his crazy new inventions, and one day he ended up creating a new troop for the game. It was the first of its kind, and it was the Sparky, the first machine troop within the game. Then he continued to create new troops. He ended up finishing the designs of two brand new troops that were the cannon cart and the flying machine. So he released the cannon cart, but right before he could release the flying machine, he received a letter from his village's chief, where the letter was apologizing and asking the builder to come back. So the builder thought about it and realized how much he missed all of the other troops back at the village. Plus he felt bad for everyone that the barbarian was ruining all of the buildings by whacking it with his sword. So he decided it was finally time for him to head back home. But before he left, he asked if anyone would like to journey back with him, and sure enough, a few of them actually said yes. So they took the balloon from the king and set off back home. When they arrived back home, they were greeted by everyone, and the builder was given a brand new statue of himself. As well, the barbarian, giant, witch, and wizard all offered to help him with building upgrades from now on. But everyone was truly curious about who his new friends were. So the builder introduced them. Meet the bowler, baby dragon, miner, ice wizard, and the battle ram. Unfortunately though, the ice wizard and battle ram can only stay for about a week, then they have to head back home. Everyone welcomed the new additions with open arms, and everything was great and the builder felt a lot better. So he decided that he wanted to give them another present as well. So he got out his designs of the cannon cart and gave it to the chief. But as if out of nowhere, a gust of wind ended up taking the draft right out of his hands and carried it off the island. As if by fate, the gust of wind carried the designs all the way to the night village, where the master builder found the designs. A little upset, the builder said, "That's alright, I've got plenty more better ideas." He then showed them the designs, and their jaws hung open. Everyone couldn't believe it, but they couldn't wait for him to add it into the village. So after a long and eventful day, everyone decided to call it a night, and for the first time in a long while, the builder truly felt at home. Hey guys, so this week marks the second week that our builder had left us, and since then the barbarian has taken over as the temporary builder. But now his week is up and it's time for the giant to take over. So here's my quick story on why the barbarian got fired from being builder, and why the giant is taking over. I hope you enjoy, and please note that this is not created by and or endorsed by Supercell. It is simply a fan-made story to explain these events. A week ago, our builder left. The barbarian picked up the builder's hat and hammer and thought to himself that he was destined to be the next builder. Sadly though, he did not live up to his dreams, because after a week on the job, he was fired. Everyone appreciated all of his work and efforts in trying to help, but they didn't like his technique and how he built things. It looked really unorthodox, and people were scared that he was going to hurt someone with his sword, especially our heroes. While the barbarian was upgrading them, he nearly whacked them with the sword on multiple occasions. Now that the heroes are done being upgraded, they decided to fire the barbarian and take away his builder hat. Although the village did still need a builder, so they had to think who would make the best builder. They needed someone that was strong enough and capable of building these big buildings. So after interviewing each troop, they decided to hire the giants as the next builder. He was big and strong, plus he didn't need a hammer, since he could punch as hard as a hammer. Plus he had a lot of spare time since most players don't use him too much in battles. But the real convincing point was that the giant also promised to defend the village when they are on defense. He said if anyone destroys my tiny little shack, giant will smash them. And since the barbarian was now fired, his friends from Clash Royale went back to the arena. Of course the barbarian was upset by this, but the royals did write him a very formal letter relieving him of his position. Well, it's that time of the week again. The time of the week where our king and queen have to make some cuts to the Clash of Clans workforce, and sadly for the giant, he just wasn't cutting it. The king and queen had a week-long discussion about the giant's performance as a builder, and they decided that he wasn't cut out to be a builder. For a few reasons actually. For one, that he was meant to destroy things, not build them. Plus, because of his size, when he was traveling around the base, he came really close to squashing a few villagers. And also for some reason he kept insisting on upgrading the walls. For whatever reason he really enjoyed hitting walls. Not to mention one of the reasons he even got hired in the first place was because he offered to help defend the village when it was attacked. But he was practically useless on defense. A few archers had no problem taking him out. So it's really no surprise that the giant is being fired. He's way more useful destroying things, not building them. So now it's time for the heroes to make another big decision on who to hire next. They needed someone that was smaller than the giant so that they don't squash anyone, and smarter than the giant so they don't keep doing walls. And someone who can add more value on defense. You know who would be perfect for this? That's right.
You're the wizard.
The wizard. But sadly he was too busy this week working on some new boom in a box spell. Maybe next week he can take over. But until then, I guess the witch will have to take over. At least she offered a pretty cool spell that shrinks troops when being attacked. And she might even have her Larrys to help her build stuff quicker. But they might not be allowed since they are just kids and underage workers are against the Clash of Clans law. Who knows, the giant may even find a job somewhere else. With his brand new resume, he could probably find a job anywhere. The builder might be getting sent home a lot sooner than we think. He just isn't fitting in very well in the real world right now and is causing tons of problems.
Open eye, feel the waves cut through me, hypnotized by the sounds I'm breathing in. Hold tight, chemicals collide. Hold tight, hold tight, hold tight. Dripping lights paint the skies, all because of you. Dripping lights paint the skies, only last forever. Stop in time. Yeah, I'm surrendering. Hold tight, chemicals collide. Hold tight, hold tight, hold tight. Dripping lights paint the skies, all because of you.
Back on March 12th, 2013, things were a lot different in the Clash of Clans village. For one, there was a recent discovery of dark elixir, so the village had found a new way to create and clone these new flying troops called minions. And a lot of the villagers had high expectations on what this new, better version of elixir could do. They just couldn't wait to see what they could create next. So this is going to be the tale of how the Hog Rider met his hog. Here is the Hog Rider's story. Back when the village was first getting established, the chief had to make a seriously tough decision. He had two similar troops that did practically the same thing, but unfortunately, he could only keep one due to army space limitations. So he decided to have these two troops duel it out to see who should get to stay. The two troops that were needing to compete was a barbarian who had a great mustache, was illiterate in English, could hold his breath for more than an hour, and who wielded a sword. The barbarian was facing off against a troop named Ryder, who also had some great facial hair, was an extremely annoying singer,
Oh, did we make that super clear?
had a fear of skeletons, and wielded a hammer. The two of them met in front of the chief, and then on the chief's command they fought. The fight was over in less than a minute, as the barbarian absolutely dominated Ryder. His hammer was no match for the barbarian's sword and muscles. Not to mention he also had the barbarian king teach him how to fight properly. So Ryder unfortunately lost and was not allowed into the village's army. Instead, he got stuck with all of the dirty work such as preparing all the meals for the armies and cleaning up other troops' messes. His job sucked. But he got to work immediately and went over to the campfire to start preparing the next meal. When he got there, there were already some giants sitting around and it looked like they were playing some sort of game. When Ryder got closer to the camp, he realized that they were tormenting one of the hogs that were meant to be barbecued later. The hog took a quick look at Ryder and gave him a look of desperation before a giant threw him to another giant as if they were playing football. American football, that is. Ryder knew that he had to do something, but he also knew that those giants could easily crush him without any effort if they caught him. He thought about it quickly, but then continued to make his way over to the army camp that the giants were playing at. And once he got there, he told the giants that he needed the hog so that he could cook it for dinner. So the giants reluctantly handed over the hog. The hog was just as big as Ryder. Ryder then took the hog back the way he came, but before he could get too far, a giant yelled out,
Hey, that's not the way to the kitchen. He's a thief.
Then all of the giants got up and quickly ran after Ryder and the hog. Ryder was running out of space to run as they were running straight towards a section of walls. The giants were starting to gain on them, and Ryder and the hog were both running into a corner of walls. Luckily, at the last second, the hog threw Ryder onto his back and then leaped over the wall. They then continued to run all the way deep into the forest. Ryder took a quick look back and realized that the giants had gotten trapped behind the walls, and he thought that they will be stuck there for a while, so they should be safe for the time being. After Ryder and the hog got settled down, they were both extremely appreciative for saving each other's lives. Ryder originally saved the hog's life from being barbecued, and then the hog helped them run away from the giants. They realized how great of a team they could make, but before they could do anything else, the village chief along with the entire village army came running out, ambushing the hog and Ryder. Ryder jumped onto the hog and they were about to take off running, but right before, the chief yelled out, "Wait, we just want to talk." So Hog and Ryder stayed and heard him out. The chief told them a short story about all the difficulties their army has been having with getting over the walls. All about how the wall breakers are too stupid and just blow themselves up against the nearest wall no matter where that wall is, and how giants take forever to destroy the walls. Not to mention that the alchemists weren't able to upgrade their spell factory to start brewing the jump spell. So you two make a great team, and have something that our army desperately needs. So if you're interested, we'd like to have both of you join our army. The Hog and Ryder looked at each other, and then Ryder said, "We have a few demands that we want." And the chief replied with, "What kinds of demands?" Who let the hogs out? By the looks of the newest cards in Clash Royale, it looks like the Hog Rider has lost his hog, and they came back with helmets and the noble title of the Royal Hog. So where did the Hog Rider go, and how did the hogs get the noble title of royalty? Here is my explanation of these unexplained events in the story of how the Hog Rider lost his hog. Not too long ago, in fact very recently, there was a bit of an incident in the Clash Royale arena. So let's start back at the beginning to explain what exactly happened. At first, it was just another regular day in the arena. Armies were fighting against each other all out in all of the arenas, clans were battling each other out in the Clan War Island, and people were teaming up with each other in the 2 vs 2 mode. It was a regular day, and naturally in all of the game modes, the Hog Rider was having an incredibly busy day. Being one of the all-time favorite troops in almost all game modes, together, the Hog and the Hog Rider were an extremely powerful force that was really hard to stop. However, on that day, the Hog Rider was just finishing up an extremely tough battle where he was being played in a Hog Rider cycle deck, so he got a ton of action to say the least. In fact, being a Hog cycle deck, he was pretty much the sole reason that they won that battle. Anyway, after the battle, when the Hog Rider was walking back to take a bubble bath, one of the Clash Royale kings stopped the Hog Rider. He stood in front of them and sort of told them that he wanted to talk to the Hog. The rider responded for the Hog by telling the king that the Hog couldn't actually speak, but the king didn't seem to care and ushered the rider away. The rider and the Hog looked a little bit upset by this, but they weren't going to be questioning the king of the arena, so the rider decided to go for a bit of a walk. He decided to walk until he finally came across a barbarian and a wizard sitting on the beach. He decided to just take a seat next to them and talk until the king was done talking to his mute Hog. Anyway, back to the king and the Hog. The king asked the Hog to follow him. He took them to the VIP seats in the Clash Royale arena, reserved strictly for the royal troops and the kings. That meant that usually only the kings, the princess, the prince, the dark prince, the royal giant, and the royal ghost. However, today seemed to be an exception as it was the first time they allowed a non-royalty into the VIP section. Especially that it wasn't even a troop, it was just an animal. Once they got in, the king sat down and got ready to watch the next match. He told the Hog to come here and watch this. When the Hog went over and stared out at the arena, he noticed a battle commencing. From his experience in the arena, he noticed that one side was playing a log bait deck and the other side was playing a P.E.K.K.A. double prince deck. He watched as the battle unfolded, and then about a minute into the match, a prince was played at the very back of one of the king's towers. To this, the king said to the Hog, "Watch this. See how long it takes for that pony to pick up speed?" And the Hog watched and realized that the king was right. It was taking the horse a while to pick up speed. And then a few seconds later, a dark prince was played, and once again the Hog was asked to watch. And once again, he noticed just how long it was taking for the prince's and the dark prince's horses to gain any speed. The king turned toward the Hog and told him, "Do you see what I'm seeing? How pathetic these little ponies are. They don't complement my prince's powers quite effectively. They aren't strong or fast enough to support the might of the princes. And that's why I brought you here today. I've been watching your battles recently, and you, my friend, are by far the strongest and fastest animal in the arena. Not to mention you are able to jump over the river, whereas the horses cannot. So you will be pleased to hear that I will be adopting you and taking you out of the Hog Rider's hands." The Hog was definitely not in favor of this, and he knew that the rider would not be either, especially considering that they had created such a special bond with each other, where they would give each other baths and build things together. But since it was the king that was telling him this, he really didn't have a choice. And obviously the rider was just as displeased to hear all of this, especially since without his Hog he was pretty much useless. He was just a crappier version of the barbarian, since he wasn't as strong and didn't even wield a sword. Lucky enough for the rider though, he was able to just go and pick up a new Hog at the Hog Rider auto lot. Anyway, back to the Hog and the king. Right after the king swore the Hog in, giving him the royal status, they immediately went to the training camp arena where they began to test out the Hog with the princes. The Hog was given a brand new helmet to represent his status as royal and also to match the prince's armor. Together they tried really hard and practiced for a long time, but after all that time, things just didn't seem to work out. The Hog and the princes just didn't share the same bond as the Hog Rider did. Not to mention that the prince's armor weighed a lot more, so the Hog couldn't even run as fast anyways. They decided to take the rest of the day off and try again tomorrow, but the next day had the same results, and same with the day after that. Then on one of the last days, the Hog Rider tried to jump over the river in the middle of the arena, except the prince on his back was super unused to this and he ended up falling off. And in the heat of the moment, the Hog didn't feel the prince fall off his back and he continued to charge towards the tower all by himself. The Hog did a considerable amount of damage on his own and the king seemed decently impressed. So after the day had finished, the king suggested that the whole prince riding the Hog thing just wasn't going to work out. So they decided to give up and the princes went back to their regular horses, and the Hog was left on his own. However, this time, the king wanted to give the royal hog a try on his own, without a rider. And sure enough, he did quite well. And after using the clone spell on them a few times, the king was able to create a mini horde of the royal hogs that could swarm the tower together. The king and the royal hog seemed pretty happy with their new setup, and not to mention, even if he wanted to, he couldn't go back to his original rider since he had already picked up a new hog. So a few days later, after a lot more practice and a lot more time spent in the training arena, the king felt comfortable enough to reveal to the rest of the Clash Royale universe his brand new troops. Welcome, the Royal Hogs. Clash of Clans is nearly 5 years old, and since then, many mysteries have already been uncovered, like the story of how the Barbarian and Archer became the Barbarian King and the Archer Queen, how the Builder ended up in Clash Royale, and what happened to the Wizard and Hog Rider after they set sail for a new island. But there is another mystery still yet to be uncovered. That is, until now. Today we will take a look at the origin of the Builders, as well as how the P.E.K.K.A was created. Over 5 years ago, back at the beginning of Clash, there were 2 new troops just introduced to the village. These 2 troops both happened to be dwarves, and they were brothers. The younger brother's name was Bill, and his older brother's name was Dirk. These 2 were extremely competitive with each other, always competing to see who was the better brother. They would compete to see who could run faster, who could build better things, and even who had a bigger hammer. They would compete for literally everything. Anyways, during their first day in the village chief was asking to see what they could do in battle. So they were both sent into battle, where there were barbarians, balloons, dragons, goblins, and archers all fighting around them. Bill and Dirk felt way out of place, and quickly realized that they had no fighting abilities and were basically just standing bait. They had talents in other places though, like building things, and since building something wasn't going to save their lives in the middle of this battle, they quickly jumped out of the way and hid in a bush until the battle was over. When the battle had finished, all the troops around them had turned into a purple liquid known as elixir, whereas the 2 brothers did not. They returned to their village and approached the chief. When the chief saw them, his jaw hung open. He had never witnessed troops come back from a battle before. This was a first. But he wasn't so much impressed as he was furious. He scolded them for being cowards and not fighting with the rest of the army. He even blamed them for being the reason that they didn't get the 3-star. The builders felt awful, and the chief was furious. So the brothers offered to make it up to the chief for supposedly losing the battle for their village. So they offered to build him something that could help. The chief allowed this, but told them that they had until sunset. Otherwise, they will both be exiled off the island. So both brothers got to work, attempting to create their best creation yet. And by the time sunset came, they both met the chief outside of his town hall. And then the chief asked Bill to present his creation first. So Bill brought forward a shiny blue piece of armor. And when Bill explained what it was, he said, "Since I cannot fight in battles for you, I created something that can. I present to you the Builder's personal electronic killing knight assistant, or for short, the Bibka." Then the Builder flicked a switch on its back and the Bibka came to life. He showed what the Bibka could do. It was the strongest troop the chief had ever seen. He could swing hard enough to send barbarians flying, and its armor was built out of the strongest materials that could be found on the island. And the king was extremely impressed, and after he got over the amazing new creation by Bill, he asked Dirk to bring forth his creation. So Dirk unveiled his brand new defense. He called it the Crusher. Sadly, the chief did not look too impressed, and he said, "So you're telling me that your younger brother created an artificially intelligent mechanical robot with super strength, and you made me a giant rock that goes up and down?" After realizing how stupid that sounded, Dirk looked down and agreed. The chief was so disappointed in Dirk that he exiled him into an abandoned island a long ways away. And Dirk spent almost 5 years taking a power nap, trying to sleep off how mad he was that he got kicked off the island while his younger brother got to stay. He swore that one day he would get his revenge, but until then, he went back to sleep. And back to the home village. Even though the chief was furious at Dirk, he was still awestruck at Bill's new Bubka, but he said there was one tiny problem: the name. He said he had to change it because it sounded really stupid. So Bill suggested, how about just P.E.K.K.A? The chief approved and was so amazed at Bill's building talents that he named him the Village Builder. Bill continued to build new structures for the chief and continued to upgrade his greatest creation, the P.E.K.K.A, making it more and more powerful as time went on. Life was pretty good. Bill got to build things all day, every day, which he loved doing. But as time went on, Bill started getting tired of doing the same thing day in and day out. But the chief continued to force him to work. So the builder had to do something about it. Last episode, we found out about the origin of the builders and how the original P.E.K.K.A. was created. But there are still 2 more versions of the P.E.K.K.A. that are still unanswered for. So this is going to be the story of how the mini P.E.K.K.A. and super P.E.K.K.A. were brought into this world of Clash. So even though the builder didn't like his job in the village, he decided to put up with it for the time being. But the thing that really got him through this was the fact that he learned how to clone himself and create 4 other builders. But we'll explain that in another story. As the years went on, he continued to do the same old job day in and day out. However, about 5 years later, he finally reached his boiling point. But first, let's head over to where the other builder, Dirk, was exiled. After almost 4.5 years, Dirk finally woke up from his extremely long slumber and realized that he was on some mysterious island. Even though he was sleeping for almost 5 years, he still clearly remembered how his brother showed him up and created some super cool new mechanical robot called a P.E.K.K.A. Even though Dirk was super impressed with his creation, he also felt super betrayed that he got exiled, whereas Bill, his brother, got to stay back in the main village. So Dirk promised himself that one day he will return to the village with the biggest and best creation the village has ever seen in their lives. But the only problem was that he still had to create this new super creation. He still didn't even know what he wanted to make. So first, he decided to make his house. He got to work and finished his first building, the Builder Hall. And once he was done creating that, he decided to create a laboratory as well, that he would use to create his new creation. However, after a few days, and even weeks, his mind was still blank, and he had no good ideas. But then one day he had a flashback to when he got exiled. He remembered seeing his brother's creation and how magnificent it looked. However, he felt that there was something missing to it. So then it hit him. I'll just create a bigger and better version of the P.E.K.K.A. So he quickly got to work gathering all the resources he could find, and he worked hours on end. He worked many days without even sleeping, so determined to finish his project. And then about 14 days later, he added the finishing touches to his creation. And then he went outside to await and see what the final product looked like. Then, out of the smoke emerged Dirk's version of the P.E.K.K.A. When it got out of the building collapsed behind him. This new creation was a powerhouse. 5 seconds after being born, he already destroyed a full building. Dirk could not have been happier. But then once the smoke settled down, a tiny blue metal robot came running out. This was no Mega P.E.K.K.A. This was just a tiny little mini P.E.K.K.A. Dirk's smile faded. He was no longer proud of himself. All he felt was a shameful feeling in his stomach. He was so ashamed of his mini P.E.K.K.A. And then weird enough, another mini P.E.K.K.A. came running out of the rubble. There were 2 mini P.E.K.K.A.s standing in front of Dirk. And then Dirk realized what must have happened. He had added enough materials to create a full-size P.E.K.K.A. But the laboratory's machinery must have had insignificant energy to combine them all. So instead of making one full-size P.E.K.K.A., it split them up into 2 mini P.E.K.K.A.s. Dirk was unsure of what to do, since he had no other way of getting more energy sources, and besides, the mini P.E.K.K.A. destroyed all of his equipment and his house. So he had nothing left, and all the trees in the forest were going to take years to grow back. So he decided to take his boat to a nearby village and hope for the best. When he got to a nearby island, the first thing that popped out at him was a giant arena where he could hear a roaring crowd inside. There was some sort of battle going on between 2 separate sides, the blue team and the red team. Dirk sat and watched the first match, and after the match was over, he confronted the king and asked him if he could spare any resources to build a new house and possibly supply any extra energy. The king replied asking what happened to his old home, and Dirk told him what had happened, how the mini P.E.K.K.A. destroyed his house and now they were homeless, and how he has no materials left to build a new house. The king, who was actually impressed by this, offered Dirk a deal. He said,
I'll tell you what, I will give you all of your necessary resources that you need for your house, and then I'll even triple that, and give you even more for any future projects you might have in mind. However, I do not have anything that can help you with your shortage of energy, and all I want in return is one of your mini P.E.K.K.A.s. If that thing can destroy buildings as easily as you say, then I think it can help us win way more battles.
Dirk thought about it for a second, and then realized that he has 2 mini P.E.K.K.A.s, so why not just give up one? Besides, one destroyed his house, so he didn't really want to be around him anyways. So Dirk and the king made their trade. And then Dirk went back to his island, and the king became an unstoppable force with a new P.E.K.K.A., with a new mini P.E.K.K.A. Once Dirk got back to his island, he quickly rebuilt his house and started working on some new plans for his P.E.K.K.A 2.0. Once again, he worked for weeks on end, but he still could not think of any solution to prevent the machine from making 2 mini P.E.K.K.As instead of 1 super P.E.K.K.A. He was about to lose hope, but then one day a broken ship washed ashore. Unfortunately, a wizard and hog rider had both turned to elixir, and what was left was the hog rider's hammer and the wizard's cloak. Dirk picked up the hammer and the cloak, and inside of the cloak was a bottle of blue liquid in it. The liquid was buzzing with electricity, and Dirk thought that this must have been the lightning spell. So he took it back to his lab, brought the mini P.E.K.K.A in with him, and this time added the whole bottle of lightning to the mix. He turned the machine on and stepped out again. The machine started to shake and smoke again, before finally coming to a stop. This time the building exploded from the inside as a gigantic P.E.K.K.A stepped out. This P.E.K.K.A fused with the lightning spell and was just radiating energy, and when he stepped outside, Dirk's mouth hung open, and he quietly whispered to himself, "It's a super P.E.K.K.A." With the new introduction of the Electro Dragon, the Clash of Clans Dragon family is pretty much complete, and in my way of welcoming the Electro Dragon to the world of Clash, I wanted to make a video combining the stories of the entire Dragon family. So here is the story of the Electro Dragon, the Baby Dragon, the Inferno Dragon, and of course, the good old regular dragon. Back on August 2nd, 2012, the flying beast known as the Dragon was released into the game of Clash of Clans, along with the other 9 original troops. In later years, the Dragon went on to have some other troop counterparts like the Inferno Dragon and the Baby Dragon. But in today's video, I'm going to tell you my Dragon's origin story. Back in the days when the Grand Warden had created and released the first 10 troops in the game, a dragon was amongst those troops. The dragon, however, took after the typical dragon stereotype where he flew off to a volcanic mountain and guarded some pile of treasure that he stole. It was just the way that the dragon was born, the same way that the goblins were born greedy, wizards were born arrogant, and barbarians were born stupid. There wasn't anything anyone could do about it. So for the first little while, the village got by without the dragon. Of course, it was a bit of a loss for the village since they were missing one of the most powerful troops in the game, however they were able to get by for the time being. And just like how the dragon had fled the village, so had a rogue group of goblins, who had all rebelled and formed their own little clan known as the Goblin Horde. That Goblin Horde had been making life very difficult for the village by stealing all of their resources and then storing it away in their little villages. They would then have to defend it from the village when they attacked them to steal it back. At first, it was easy for the village to beat the goblins, but over time the goblins' horde got smarter and built bigger and stronger defenses to stop them from being beat. It ended up getting to a point where the villagers could no longer beat the goblin bases, and since the villagers couldn't steal their loot back, the goblins were still able to keep most of their resources and start stealing more and more. Until it got to a point where the goblins took pretty much everything from the village, and being the greedy goblins that they were, what they stole wasn't enough. So they sought after new treasures greater than what they had. And coincidentally, that just so happened to be the dragon's treasure. So the goblins decided to take on the dragon's lair and try and steal his treasures. Despite being extremely greedy, the goblins were not stupid, so they were actually able to create an elaborate plan and steal all of the dragon's resources, without being noticed. And before the dragon even realized what had happened, it was too late. So now that the dragon had nothing left to defend, he returned back home to try and find out what happened to his treasure. When the dragon got there, the village suggested that it was probably the greedy goblins who had stolen his treasure, as that's what they've been doing to them the whole time. Then one of the villagers had an idea, and he suggested that they should both team up and help each other out to get both of their loot and treasures back. The dragon agreed, and together they were finally able to take down the Goblin Horde's bases, all the way up to their Goblin King's lair. And together, once they vanquished the Goblin King, they returned back to the village with all of their lost loot and treasures. They made a pretty good team together, so the villagers offered to help protect the dragon's treasure, and he could help defend their loot. So the dragon thought about it and then agreed to it, since having 2 groups of people defend something is always better than just one. So the dragon was now a valuable part of the village, helping defend the village from attacks, and even helping them steal some loot from other villages. However, part of being on a full-time guard shift for the loot, the dragon was never able to join the Clash Royale arena battles, as he was already too occupied defending the treasures. However, his 2 dragon counterparts were able to take his place in the arena instead, and how the Inferno Dragon and Baby Dragon made it to the Clash world is an entirely different story. for another time. Welcome back to part 2 of the dragon's origin story. This time taking a look at the dragon's two mini counterparts, the baby dragon and the inferno dragon. The inferno dragon, who carries a large barrel full of lava on his back, acts as a traveling single targeting inferno and is exclusive to Clash Royale only. The baby dragon, however, is in all 3 parts of the Clash universe, but for a reason to be explained later, he only rages when he's alone in the builder base and in our regular home base. However, when he's alone in the Royal Arena, he doesn't have the same rage effect. So why is that? Well, find out in the baby dragon and the inferno dragon's origin story. Not long after the village unlocked the dragon at Town Hall 8, with the help of the dragon, they made very quick progress and were ready to upgrade to Town Hall 9. The dragon was a huge help, leading most of their most important attacks, especially in wars, where the dragon was able to successfully bring home the 3-star most of the time. And by some very weird coincidence, once the Town Hall finished upgrading to Town Hall 9, the dragon laid 2 eggs. Everyone was shocked, including the dragon, who had no idea where those came from. But nonetheless, everyone knew what this meant. There were going to be some new baby dragons, and knowing that they were capable of growing to become as powerful as the regular dragon, they knew that they had to take extremely good care of them. So they took the eggs and laid them down next to the town hall, which was supposed to be the most secure building in the village. Unfortunately, the next day, a group of really greedy goblins stole the eggs in hopes that they would be able to sell it for a lot of gold or other resources. And when the dragon found out that his eggs had been stolen, he was infuriated and vowed to find whoever took them and that he would set them on fire. And when the goblins found out that the dragon had put them on his hit list, they started to freak out. They knew they had to get rid of the egg or else the dragon would burn them alive. But they also knew that they couldn't just return it, otherwise the whole village would know that they took it. So they ended up deciding to get rid of it instead. The goblins knew that if they hid it on the island, that the dragon would eventually find it and most likely trace it back to them. So they had to hide it somewhere much further away. So while the goblins were searching for a place to hide the eggs, they came across the master builder who was visiting the home village. He had just finished gearing up one of the archer towers and was about to head back. And right then the goblins knew what they had to do. So a few goblins went to quickly distract the master builder by doing some weirdly well-rehearsed dance, while the rest of the goblins went to go hide the 2 eggs in his tiny little rowboat. And to be completely honest, they did an absolutely awful job hiding the eggs, as they weren't covered by anything and they were sort of sticking out of the tiny boat. But luckily, the master builder was so tired and exhausted from working 70 hours straight that he didn't notice the 2 eggs, and instead, as soon as he got into the boat, he fell right asleep. And he didn't wake up until he arrived back at his night village. And when he did wake up, he finally noticed the 2 eggs in his towboat. The first thing he thought was, how the heck did these get here? And after that, he realized that they must have come from the home village and he should bring them back right away. But for some really weird reason, there was absolutely no way for the master builder to get back to the home village, unless there was a defense to be geared up. And since he just came back from gearing up the archer tower, there were no other defenses to be geared up for a long time. So for the time being, the master builder was stuck in the night village with his 2 eggs. And a few days later, both of the eggs hatched, where 2 tiny baby dragons popped out. Both of these dragons were able to fire these tiny little fireballs, but they didn't have any rage ability or anything. At least, not yet. Find out why the baby dragon rages in Clash of Clans regular base and in the builder base, but not in Clash Royale. And also find out how the baby dragon became the inferno dragon in the next story. Once the village upgraded to Town Hall 9, by coincidence the dragon laid 2 eggs. While waiting for them to hatch, a group of goblins stole the eggs, but then had to get rid of them to avoid being killed by the dragon. They hid them in the master builder's towboat, and without knowing, he took them back to his night village. Then, a few days later, the eggs hatched and 2 baby dragons emerged, but they didn't have their rage effect yet. So find out in today's story how the baby dragon got his special ability, and how the inferno dragon was created for the Clash Royale arena.
All the pain.
While the master builder was at the home village, the builder had shown him one of his new defenses that he was working on and planning on releasing for the next town hall, which was Town Hall 10. He had called it the Inferno Tower. And when the master builder saw this, he was actually really impressed. And rather than just being happy and proud of the builder, the master builder was determined to take his creation and make it even better. After all, he had to live up to his name of master builder. So when the baby dragons were born, the master builder had an idea that could make the Inferno Tower even better. Since in the builder's design and prototype, the Inferno Tower was just like any other defense, a stationary defense that could only target within a certain range. The master builder thought to himself, but what if I could transfer the Inferno Tower's powers to a living being, to make a troop that could be just as deadly as the Inferno Tower, but wasn't restricted to a certain distance or spot. So with this new idea, the master builder thought that a flying mini dragon would be a perfect fit. And to make the Super Inferno Tower troop, he only needed one baby dragon. So he brought both baby dragons to his lab, and at random he chose one of the baby dragons to turn into his new Super Inferno. And once he had the baby dragon, he took him to the only place that he knew he could get lava from, P.E.K.K.A.'s playhouse. So the baby dragon and the master builder headed over to the Clash Royale arenas and trekked their way all the way up the side of the volcano. Once they arrived at the top, the master builder filled a wooden barrel up with molten hot lava. And in case some of you guys are skeptical about how this wood is being able to contain all the heat from the lava, well, the barrel isn't just made from any type of wood. It's actually made out of the same wood used to make the master builder's battle machine. It's wood that was blessed with magic from the wizards to make it indestructible and immune to all sorts of heat. So that's also why that when the battle machine summons lightning, it doesn't set the battle machine on fire. It also holds the power of the electricity inside of the hammer. So if this works properly, the barrel should be able to hold the heat of the lava inside the barrel, so that it doesn't cool off and become molten rock. But anyways, back to the mountain. The master builder finished filling the barrel with the lava, and now the next step was to find a way to connect the barrel with the baby dragon's fire supply. So the master builder and the baby dragon traveled all the way back to the builder base, and then the master builder crafted a special helmet with a hose type device that would connect the helmet and the barrel. Then the baby dragon put the special helmet on, and the master builder fastened the barrel and hose to the baby dragon's back. The master builder then took a step back and watches the baby dragon tested out his new armor. The baby dragon was now able to draw lava from the barrel, and then the lava would be released in the mouthpiece of the helmet, where the dragon would be able to fire a constant stream of lava out at his enemies. And the longer he stayed focused on an enemy, the more the lava would burn them. The master builder was incredibly proud of himself, and the baby dragon, or as he was now known, the Inferno Dragon, was pretty happy about his new powers as well. And not only were these two happy, the other baby dragon was just as happy to be able to see his baby brother again. And for a few days, everything was all good, where the two brother dragons were able to play around and destroy enemies for fun. But then, nothing ever lasts forever, so a few days later, the Inferno Dragon got really sick, to the point where he almost didn't have enough energy to fly anymore. The master builder quickly realized the problem. The Inferno Dragon's barrel of lava was running extremely low on lava, and it looked like the Inferno Dragon was becoming very reliant on the lava to stay alive, as it was now part of him. So the master builder immediately took him back to the P.E.K.K.A.'s playhouse, and then the other baby dragon came around with them just to make sure his brother was okay. And when they finally got there, after the long journey, the master builder realized that he wasn't going to be able to make this incredibly long trip every few days just to refill the lava. So he figured he'd have to leave the Inferno Dragon at the Clash Royale arena so that he could stay close to the P.E.K.K.A.'s playhouse at all times. And so he did. He left the Inferno Dragon there, and he headed back to the builder base, and things went back to normal. As for the baby dragon, he couldn't decide where he wanted to go. Of course, he wanted to stay with his brother and go to the Clash Royale arena, but he also didn't want to leave the master builder since he was almost like a parent to him. And then he also really wanted to go meet his real parent, the dragon, back at the home village. And he couldn't really decide which one he wanted to do, but thanks to the clone spell, he didn't have to choose. He was able to go to all three places at once. But his connection with his brother was so strong that whenever he was alone in the builder base or Clash village, he would burst out into a rage until another troop joined him in the air. And at the Clash Royale arena, he never had to rage, since he always knew that his brother would be somewhere close by. And that there is the full story of the dragon, the baby dragon, and then the Inferno Dragon. The newest troop in Clash of Clans, or rather should I say, the newest beast inside of Clash of Clans, is a bigger, stronger, and more powerful version of the already popular dragon troop. The new Mega Dragon, known as the Electro Dragon, has some very unique abilities that have never before been seen inside of Clash of Clans. The Electro Dragon's attack bounces from building to building for some reason, but it does less and less damage per building it hits. He also has more health than the regular dragon and does considerably more damage, but perhaps the most unique part about the Electro Dragon is the fact that when he dies, he drops a lightning storm wherever he dies, similar to the dropping of a lightning spell. As my welcoming for the brand new troop at Town Hall 12, here is my story on how the Electro Dragon was brought into the world of Clash. Not too long ago, in a village not too far away, all the villagers and troops were all getting excited and ready to celebrate in anticipation for the revealing of the brand new upgraded town hall that the builder had been working on for the past 15 days. The entire village was getting in on the celebrations, and troops were just hopping from one dance party to the next. And these dance parties were being held literally everywhere, from inside the town hall, in a goblin hut, in the clan castle, and even in the middle of a battlefield. The parties were off the hook and every troop was having the time of their lives. And since the village had been maxed for a long time and were just waiting for something new to upgrade, the village was extra excited for some new things to do. But since they were maxed out, none of the troops or other builders had anything to do for those 15 days during the upgrade. So to kill time, they partied every day. Everyone was having a great time, while everyone, except for one troop, the dragon. Unfortunately, the dragon was just too big and couldn't fit inside of any of these parties inside the town hall or clan castles, and when he tried dancing outside with the Teslas, his wings kept flying all over the place and hitting things. So the dragon had to sit out the celebrations for all 15 days. During the time that everyone was partying and dancing, the dragon went to go raid some bases to help him kill some time. Even though the village was already full on resources, he still went ahead and started attacking bases. So during one of his raids, since it wasn't worth anything, the attack was sort of careless in a way. And normally when doing a zap, quake, drag attack, usually the lightning spells and earthquakes are deployed before the dragons. But since it was such a careless attack, this time the dragons were deployed first. And then once the chief realized that he forgot the lightning spells, he quickly dropped them on top of the air defense, and at this point in the raid, the dragons were already on top of their air defenses as well. And then they were in the process of taking them out. The first lightning spell hit the ground and a bunch of lightning bolts struck all around the dragons. Slightly startled by this, the dragon looked up to see all the lightning bolts smashing all around him. And as he was looking up, the second bottle of lightning spell was dropped from the sky. And awestruck at what the dragon was seeing, he opened his mouth in awe. And by some crazy chance, the bottle of lightning spell dropped right into the dragon's mouth. And when the bottle of lightning entered the dragon, the bottle didn't break completely. However, there was a slight crack in the bottle where tiny bits of lightning spell were seeping out of it. But overall, the lightning bolt stayed safe inside of the dragon and inside of the bottle. The dragon was a little bit shook up by this, but he tried to carry on in the battle. So he moved on to his next target and opened his mouth to spew some burning hot flames. However, when he blew out, instead of fire, a strong bolt of lightning came exploding out of his mouth. The dragon immediately shut his mouth and looked surprised as hell at what just happened. And all the other dragons noticed too. They all came over, despite still being in the middle of an attack, to check out what just happened. Then after being urged on by the rest of the army, the new electric dragon opened his mouth again and spat out a bolt of lightning. This time the bolt of lightning hit its target, but then bounced off that building and then hit the building right behind it. But it didn't stop there. It then bounced off that building and hit the one right beside it. And then it did the same thing to that building again. No one knew what was happening, but it would be later explained to them by the genius wizards that apparently all the buildings that the builder has ever constructed, they all contain a type of metal that is an excellent conductor of electricity. So when one building is hit with such a strong surge of electricity, if the building around it are close enough, they will absorb the shock as well. However, since the buildings already absorbed some of that initial electricity, the damage it does will be slightly less to the next few buildings. Anyways, after the dragons quickly took care of the rest of the base, they all returned home. And by the time they got to their village, they noticed that the dragon that ate the lightning spell bottle had changed appearances. His red skin or scales had turned into a bright blue color that radiated electricity. Furthermore, his jaw had changed slightly, where it changed into a more solid metallic-like material that could better conduct the electricity that came flying out of the dragon's mouth. It seemed that the leaking bottle of lightning spell was causing the dragon to mutate and change his appearance, and so when the dragons all finally got back to the village, the builder was just finishing up the town hall upgrade to town hall 12. And like always, once a new town hall is achieved, the entire village and troops all get hard to work farming up resources and upgrading buildings. So in the next battle, the Electro Dragon was brought into battle. However, this time unfortunately, he was taken out by an air defense and a seeking air mine. And when the dragon turned into elixir, the lightning spell that was still in his stomach fell to the ground and broke, releasing the entirety of the lightning spell to wreak havoc where it landed. And that there pretty much covers all the Electro Dragon's unique abilities. So there is the story on how the dragon became the Electro Dragon. This is a fan fiction story about the Goblin King and his horde, as well as a brand new, never before seen troop known as a Reptilian. The Reptilian is a fan-made concept done by Vovson. To see its stats and what it does, check out my most recent video or head over to Vov's channel. Vov also reached out to me asking me to make a story on this troop, and despite this not being an actual troop within the game, it does help to explain the theoretical origin of the goblins, the minions, the goblin horde, and the Goblin King. I hope you guys enjoy this story. as Vav and I both put a lot of time into creating this troop and the story. So anyways, let's get into the story. Since the beginning of Clash of Clans, there has been a group of goblins living peacefully in the forest close to the village. For many generations, they lived alongside a group known as the Reptilians. Together, they made a pretty good team, since the Reptilians were skilled hunters and the goblins were extremely good at gathering edible plants. They were an ideal hunter-gatherer tribe. So as time went on, generations passed, and it came to a point where the head chief of the goblin tribe had peacefully passed away, and a new chief named Gollum stepped up to take his place, and his very first order of business was to be referred to as king from now on. At first, no one really bothered too much about it since it didn't really affect anyone, but slowly as time went on, the Goblin King began getting more and more strict, and demanding more and more. He became obsessed by being king, and started craving riches of all kinds to prove his power. To satisfy his craving, he began ordering his goblins to steal and bring him gold and other valuable resources, and the king kept getting more and more corrupt. He kept demanding more and more as time went on, and his goblins started to become corrupt as well, following his orders for so long that they were starting to become greedy just like him. As all of this was happening, the Reptilians noticed the corruption within the goblin tribe, so they had collectively decided to distance themselves from them. The group of Reptilians had hiked all the way to the other side of the island, and once they set up their little camp, after the long hike, they all were pooped, so they went to sleep for the night. Then the next day when they woke up to go hunting for their food, they came across a tiny lake full of black liquid. One of the Reptilians told everyone, "I know what this is. I remember eavesdropping on the Clash of Clans village and overheard the Barbarian King talking about how some black liquid turned him into an immortal Barbarian King." So all of the Reptilians thought that if they drank it as well, they would become immortal just like him. However, what they didn't hear is that there needs to be an electrical impulse in order to fully complete the transformation. So without knowing that, the group of Reptilians began to drink all of the dark elixir from the tiny lake. Unfortunately, the lake was so small that not all of the Reptilians could get some dark elixir to drink. Only about half of them did. So once they drained the entire lake, they all got out. Then, about half the Reptilians began to transform. Tiny little bulges began to protrude from their shoulders, and their entire bodies began to morph into a slightly different form. Then finally, when the transformations had finished, there was a brand new flying reptilian that was standing before the rest of the regular reptilians. These new flying troops became so dependent on the dark elixir that they couldn't go very long without having any. And the only place that they could find any more dispensable dark elixir was at the Clash of Clans village. So when they got to the village, the chief offered them a deal. He would give them between 6 to 12 drops of dark elixir, depending on how strong they were, and in exchange they would go do all of the village's bidding. So the flying reptilians who desperately needed the dark elixir accepted the extremely low offer of dark elixir, and in return aided in attacks for the village chief. And since these flying reptilians were doing all of the village's bidding, the villagers began to refer to them as minions. Then back in the forest, a new war was beginning to stir between the goblin horde and the reptilian gang. A conflict that could change the course of history forever for the world of Clash. This is a fan fiction story about the Goblin King and his horde, as well as a brand new never-before-seen troop known as a Reptilian. The Reptilian is a fan-made concept done by Vav Vovson, and to see its actual stats and what it does, check out my most recent video or head over to Vav's channel. Vav also reached out to me asking me to make a story on this troop, and despite this not being an actual troop within the game, it does help to explain the theoretical origin of the goblins, minions, the goblin horde, and the Goblin King. So to see the first part of the story, click on the card in the top right of the screen right now, and then like the video if you did enjoy, and without further ado, let's get into it. After half of the Reptilians had turned into minions and left to join the village, the rest of them were forced to go back to their original camp with the Goblin Horde, since there wasn't enough resources and supplies in their new area. During that time, a group of goblins had escaped the Goblin King's wrath and gone to the village looking for work. The village chief took them in exchange for their help in battles. When the Reptilians got back to the goblin camp, they noticed that there were no goblins there anymore. Their campfire was still going though, and their pile of treasure was still there as well. They figured that the goblins were just out gathering more resources or something like that. But shortly after, the group of goblins came back with loads of gold and gems. While they were away, they had gone and raided the Clash of Clans village, but the attack that they sent on the village was merely a diversion for their real heist. While the village and chief were busy defending the attack, the rest of the goblins raided the village and stole most of their gold and over 2,000 gems. Now normally when starting a new game, you get 500 gems for free at the start, but originally it was supposed to be 2,500 gems, but thanks to the goblin horde, they stole all of that away from us. When the reptilian found out about this, they were just as angered as the villagers, so angry that they confronted the Goblin King and insisted that they return all of his stolen resources. But being the greedy Goblin King that he was, he ordered his goblin army to get rid of the reptilians. The goblins pushed the reptilians away and forced them to retreat. So the next day the reptilians regrouped and declared war against the goblins. And for quite some time the goblins and reptilians were so caught up in their fight that the goblins were not able to raid the village anymore. The reptilians were in a way protecting the village from them. And as time went on, the fight was still going on strong. The goblins, who outnumbered the reptilians, were starting to take control of the war and were days away from beating the reptilians. But luckily, the Clash of Clans village was progressing very quickly and was already a max Town Hall 6, ready to upgrade to Town Hall 7. And a few days later, after the completion of the Town Hall upgrade, the goblins finally forced the reptilians to retreat. They escaped to the village and confronted the village chief. They explained to him everything that was happening, how they were defending the village from the goblins, and then to this, the king was very grateful and was determined to repay the reptilians for their deed. So in return, he did his absolute best to wipe out the goblins by taking out their bases one by one and stealing back some of their precious resources. Until one day, they finally made it to the Goblin King's hideout, where they successfully crushed his base and took him out for good. As for the reptilians, as a way of repaying them and saying thank you, he offered them a place in his village and was offered to fight alongside the rest of their army for a small price of regular elixir. The reptilians gladly accepted his offer and then continued to fight for the village. And perhaps if you want the more realistic story, since these troops are not actually in the game, you could just pretend that the reptilians just went back into the jungle or forest to live their everyday normal lives. The newest character added to the game in Clash of Clans is known as the Trader. However, what is his real identity, and why did he come to our village with all of these super cheap deals for these magical potions? Find out in the Trader's backstory. Let's go over to the Clash Royale arena, and take a look at an underrated troop who's always lived in his brother's shadow, the Dark Prince. It's no surprise that between him and his brother, the regular prince, he isn't the favorite prince by a long shot. The Dark Prince was always jealous that the prince did more damage than him, he was better looking, and he was even worth more elixir. This would obviously upset anyone, having to always live in someone else's shadow. Even their father, who was one of the kings of the arena, preferred the prince over the Dark Prince. In each deck, he would often choose to use the regular prince instead of him, so the Dark Prince held a bit of a grudge against his dad and his brother. He always wanted to get back at them, but there was literally nothing he could do. If ever he fought his brother, he would lose, and he would never take down his dad on his own. Especially with the help of his princesses, he could never do it. So he heard about the discovery of magic potions in the Clash of Clans village one day, and he was thrilled, because the village would be sending them to the arena at some point, and he could use them to make himself even stronger. His prediction was right. The Clash of Clans village sent over a whole carriage full of potions, but the Dark Prince anticipated this and met them before they could reach the arena. He told them that he was one of the king's sons and that he could take the potions to the arena for them. The barbarian, who obviously wasn't the brightest, agreed to this and gave the Dark Prince the wagon. The Dark Prince's plan was working out perfectly. Now all he had to do was find the power potion, drink it, take all the elixirs, and bring the rest of the potions to the arena. This way, even if the king decides to share the potions equally with everyone, the Dark Prince will still have had more potions than everyone else, therefore making him stronger. The Dark Prince grabbed what he thought was the power potion, but since he didn't know any better, he accidentally grabbed the resource potion instead. So he chugged the entire bottle, and he immediately felt off and knew something was wrong. By accidentally drinking a potion that wasn't meant to be drank, it ended up changing the Dark Prince's appearance. His eyebrows grew much larger and turned blue, and then he also grew a blue mustache and a goatee. The potion also ended up giving him a bit of a crazy look in his eyes. The Dark Prince no longer looked like a prince, and surely his dad and brother would never let him hear the end of that. So he had to make sure that they never saw him like this. And he also never wanted anyone else to be able to have the real power potion and get what he could never have. So he decided to steal the rest of the potions on the carriage, and he took it back to the village. He followed the barbarian's trail back to his own village, and he went to go see the only person that could turn him back to what he once was. He met with the Grand Warden, and he asked him what he could do to reverse the spell. But unfortunately, the Grand Warden told him that the only way to do that would be with a spell that would require gems. And now that the Grand Warden's magic wasn't as powerful as it once was, it would require a lot more gems. And by a lot more, I mean a lot more. So the Grand Warden sent him on his ways, thinking that he would never be able to acquire enough gems. But the Dark Prince had an idea that could get him what he needs. So he took his carriage of potions and traveled from village to village selling his potions in exchange for gems. It seemed to work really well. Some villages wouldn't buy any, but then others would buy him out because they are a super cheap deal, and it sort of acted like a black market. And every time he would run out of potions or supplies to sell, he would intercept the barbarian who transports the new supply of potions from the village to the Clash Royale arena, and then he would steal them from the barbarian every time. So the potions would never actually end up making it to the arena, and they never even knew that they existed. And then the Dark Prince would have a never-ending supply of potions and supplies. And at the end of each day, he would go to see the Grand Warden to see if he had enough gems. And each day, the Grand Warden would send him off, telling him that it still wasn't enough, and that he would need a lot more. So it looks like the traitor, as he was now known, was going to be sticking around for a lot longer. And despite this Dark Prince being missing from the arena, no one seemed to notice since he had thousands of clones running around in the battle instead. One of the newest and most powerful troops in Clash of Clans, and a 5 elixir solid area splash card in Clash Royale, the bowler in both games is a big blue dude that carries around his boulder, and as his name suggests, he bowls that rock and flattens whoever or whatever it hits. Weird enough though, in Clash of Clans the bowler's rock bounces, but in Clash Royale he simply rolls the boulder. So why is that? Here is the complete origin story of how the bowler came into the world of Clash. Back on March 21st, 2016, in the Clash of Clans village, one of the Giant's long-lost cousins showed up on the shores next to the Clash of Clans village. Like the Giant, this guy was a big and strong-looking dude, and wore only a tiny cloth, but despite their similarities, there was one massive difference. He was bright blue. But when this new big blue guy arrived at the village, he claimed that he was from a nearby island, and his tribe lent him this boat to travel the seas in search of their other ancestors. Which he then said that he thinks he finally found them as he looked straight at the Giants. The boat that he used to get there was then stored by the village chief and would be saved and wouldn't be used again until the wizard and hog rider would take it a year later in search of the builder base. So anyway, as the new blue troop was getting settled into his new village, he often hung out a lot with the Giants. And something that the new blue troop wasn't expecting when he came to the new village was to be one of the smaller and weaker troops there, since back home he was the biggest, strongest, and fastest at everything, but now standing next to the Giants that simply was not the case. And in a competitive spirit, the big blue guy wanted to figure out something that he was better than the Giants at. And coincidentally enough, there was a new character who had just come to the village as well, the bearded strongman, who many of you guys may now know as the Clan Games guy. However, back in 2016, he was still testing out and experimenting with the Clan Games, and as a great opportunity for the Clan Games guy, he offered to host a mini Clan Games between the bowler and Giant to see who was better, and if the blue guy could even beat the Giant in any event. So for the first challenge was a simple race, and the Giant won by a long shot, despite some questionable spells being used, but nonetheless the Giant was awarded the win. Next was a strength contest, where both troops went up against a cannon, and effortlessly again the Giant won. And this went on and on and on, where the Giant kept whooping the blue guy's butt in every event, until finally the final event came up. It was a shot put contest. And since the two troops that were competing were absolutely massive, they had to use large rocks rather than small shot put balls. So the Giant went first and tried to pick up one of the large boulders laying around on the village. However, once he tried to pick it up, he just couldn't get it out of the ground. It was way too heavy. So finally having a chance to win an event, the bowler went over to one of the stranger looking boulders and picked it up with ease. This boulder was one of the rare ones that could only be found in the early days of Clash, and the boulder was made from something completely different, and was actually incredibly light, at least by Giant standards. So the big blue guy picked it up and gave it a toss, and instead of just landing, the boulder actually bounced before coming to a stop. And not only was the boulder really light, but it was also super bouncy, thanks to whatever elements or magic made up the rock. So the bowler won that event by a mile and finally found something that he had done better than the Giant. So he decided to stick with it and become the best rock thrower the village had ever seen, since it was the only thing he was better than the Giants at. And so he did. He even got a special rock carved out to be a perfect sphere with 3 finger holes. And a lot of the villagers noticed that with him throwing the boulder around like he does, he kind of looked like he was bowling. So naturally, they decided to call him the Bowler. But then a few months later, on April 7th, 2016, the Bowler made his first appearance in the Clash Royale arena. Except for some reason, there weren't enough special boulders to take with him to the arena. So instead, he had to settle for a regular boulder. He could still throw this boulder well enough, however it was so much heavier that he had to throw it with 2 hands, and instead of throwing it, he more so rolled it along the ground, since it didn't bounce like the other boulder used to. And that there is the story on how the Bowler came into the world of Clash of Clans and Clash Royale. The Builder is without a doubt one of the most underrated troops inside of the Clash of Clans village, constantly working behind the scenes to ensure our villages run smoothly, and also constantly working on improving our village defenses to take out any attackers who dare challenge our bases. By adding fire to our cannons or extra wattage to our Teslas or just hotter flames to our Inferno towers, the Builder has always found a way to step up his game and make the defenses just that much more powerful. He's been able to improve each building somehow every time he upgrades it, usually by adding extra damage, or for other buildings it unlocks something new. However, there is this one building that whenever he upgrades it, nothing is added to it other than a new look. From an orange town hall to a black town hall, all the way to a red one and a whitish one. Nothing changes about the town hall except for the color and look. Other than the looks, the town hall acts the exact same. At least, until now. Now the town hall has a built-in super weapon that gets better and better as you add stars to it. So what happened to change the Builder's mind on his way of upgrading the town hall? Here is the story on the Builder's new secret weapon. For over 5 years, the Builder has been upgrading the town hall in the exact same manner, every single year. However, very recently, the Builder had a change of heart. So let's start back at the beginning. A few weeks ago, before the summer update, it was another regular day in the village. The Builder had just finished upgrading the very last archer tower to max level for their Town Hall 11, and he was walking back to his builder hut when he passed by the town hall. He looked up at it and admired it. He had a really special place in his heart for the town hall, even though it didn't really do anything. It was the heart of the village and also the Builder's prized possession. It was the very first building the Builder had ever created in his life, and for that reason it was also his favorite and most important building. Anyway, as he continued to his builder hut, an incoming army had begun their attack on the village, so the Builder had rushed over to his builder hut to hide from the attack. And from his builder hut he sat and watched the attack unfold. He watched as the village was torn to ruins by a powerful army, and all that was left standing was his precious town hall. And then he had to watch as the defenseless town hall was decimated by the rest of the army. Once the army collected their loot and left, the Builder emerged from his builder hut and walked over to the town hall. He searched through the rubble and looked extremely upset about what had just happened. Even though the village getting 3-starred was nothing new to the village, it was still very painful to the Builder to watch his prized building get destroyed like that. And as he was thinking that, he also thought back to a few years ago, back when the village would purposely leave the town hall outside of the walls for something called farming. It was as if the village didn't share the same view of importance that the town hall held. It just seemed like they didn't care. But anyway, he didn't let it bother him too much and he moved on. The village naturally repaired itself as it always does, and then the Builder noticed the Master Builder's towboat on the beach. The Master Builder was just getting off to start an upgrade on the new geared up multi-mortar. And the Master Builder walked right past the Builder and then began working on his new multi-mortar upgrade. The Builder saw the towboat as an opportunity to visit the brand new island known as the Builder's Base. The Builder had never been there before since he had always been stuck in the regular village, but since he no longer had any upgrades left to do, he decided what the heck, and went for it. Plus, he doubted anyone would notice anyway since they were all occupied with their own things. So, he took the boat all the way to the other village, and once he got there, he saw some incredible new buildings that he had never seen before. But above all, he noticed this giant pyramid-shaped defense that was apparently called the Mega Tesla. The Builder loved the design and its abilities so much that he wanted to take it back to the village with him. So he quickly mapped out in his head how to recreate the Mega Tesla, and then he rushed back to the village before the Master Builder could finish his mortar gear up. As soon as the Builder got back, he quickly got to work trying to create the prototype for his version of the Mega Tesla. Unfortunately though, once he did create the Mega Tesla, there was absolutely no room on the village where he could fit it. There was already way too many buildings on the available area. But then the Builder thought back to what he had noticed earlier that day, where the town hall was left completely defenseless against an army. And then he looked over at the Master Builder working on the mortar gear up, and then it hit him all at once. He would create the very first ever town hall gear up. So during the next 15 days, the Builder was hard at work trying to find a way to cram the entirety of the Mega Tesla into the town hall. Eventually he was able to, and he was even able to add in the hidden Tesla effect, where it is hidden until an enemy comes close enough and attacks it. And to avoid any copycat claims from the Master Builder, he decided to name his new Town Hall defense the Giga Tesla instead of the Mega Tesla. And as happy as the new builder was with his geared up Town Hall, he wasn't quite satisfied yet. He then continued to evolve the Town Hall and add extra add-ons to it. Each time he added something, the new Town Hall defense got better and better, and about 4 upgrades in, he remembered something else he had seen on the builder's base. He recalled overseeing the Super P.E.K.K.A in action, where when he died, he exploded into a mini supernova. And he thought to himself if he would be able to incorporate something that powerful into the Town Hall as well. And then he thought that of course he could do that, it's pretty much the same thing as the Bomb Tower. So as the ultimate geared up defense in the entire 2 villages, he combined the power of the Town Hall with the Tesla, the Mega Tesla, the Bomb Tower, and creating the builder's ultimate secret weapon known as Town Hall. This video is a little bit overdue. Back in the summer of 2017, the builder from Clash of Clans left the village temporarily to go traveling around the world, and during his travels he stopped by the Clash Royale arena. And coincidentally, when he got there, a new legendary troop known as the Mega Knight made its first appearance in the Clash Royale arena. Coincidence? I think not. So here is the story on how the builder became the Mega Knight. Also, before we start today's video, if this video gets 3,000 likes, I'll start working immediately on the next story of either the bowler, the golem, or the healer. Just let me know what one you guys want to see by voting or commenting it down below. Anyways, let's get into the story. August 4th, 2017, the day the builder decided to pack up his things and leave. It was a sad yet exciting day in the Clash universe as we saw one of our most underrated yet favorite Clash characters leave us. And thankfully, during that time, the Barbarian, Wizard, Hog Rider, and Witch were all able to pick up the slack and carry on with the builder's responsibilities. And while the builder was away, he visited places like South Korea, the US, Finland, and tons of other places. And somewhere along the line there, most likely in Finland, he found himself in the Clash Royale arena. When he initially got there, he was pretty awestruck to see all sorts of new troops that he'd never seen before, all battling it out in a different way. In this particular battle, a few certain troops caught his eye, like the Sparky for instance. So at the end of the battle, he asked one of the spectators about it, and they told him that someone called the Master Builder had specifically created him for the arena. And while they were talking about the Sparky, the next battle was commencing in the background, and the builder saw some things on the battlefield that looked very, very familiar to him. He noticed that some of his original creations were also here, like the cannon, the mortar, the Tesla, the Inferno Tower, the Expo, and the elixir pump. He wasn't mad that they copied his creations, but he was quite intrigued at how on earth they made it all the way to the arena without him. He also then saw some new buildings that he had never seen before, like the furnace, the tombstone, and the bomb tower. Everything about this new place amazed the builder, and he was really wishing that he could be a bigger part of it all. At first he thought that he should try and join the fight, so naturally he approached the king and asked him if he could test him out inside of the next battle. Unfortunately though, he didn't even make it 5 seconds before he was absolutely crushed. He quickly realized that he was not built to be a fighter like this. He was super fragile and all he had was a hammer. So he decided to stick to what he was good at. So over the next few days, he built an entirely new arena that he named the Builder's Workshop. But despite this awesome new arena that he had just made, he didn't feel like he was a part of the whole Clash Royale community just yet. He wanted to be more directly involved, just like every other troop there. So he decided that if he was going to battle like every other troop, he was going to need some serious upgrades. Luckily, building and creating things was his specialty. So for the next week or so, he worked tirelessly day in and day out, where he drafted and then created one of the most powerful exosuits possible. He made the suit with 2 gigantic spiked balls where his fist should be, and then he made a helmet and chest protector based off of the design similar to the Dark Prince's. Then in the leg area, he added built-in hydraulics and shocks that would allow him to jump up and smash his enemies with a massive jump. During the few weeks that he took putting this together, he didn't have the time or energy to shave, so he ended up growing out one of the biggest mustaches in Clash history, even bigger than the Knight's already large mustache. So when the other troops found out about the builder's new incredible battle exosuit and saw his gigantic mustache, they claimed that he looked exactly like the Knight, except way more OP. And with that, they decided to call him the Mega Knight, who lands with the force of 1,000 mustaches. Then after the builder's long-deserved vacation from the Clash of Clans village was over, he went back to fulfill his duties in the village. But thanks to the beauty of the clone spell, he was also able to stay in the Clash Royale arena and fight as the Mega Knight. And sometimes when things were really slow in the Clash of Clans village, he would even come back and watch himself in battle. After battling each other for a few years now, the Red and Blue King have finally taken this feud to another arena, and decided to settle it in a completely new and complex way. Utilizing every single arena and every single game mode, the addition of Clan Wars into the Clash Royale universe is without a doubt going to be a cornerstone part of Clash Royale. But after so many years of the same old battling between the Blue and Red King, what instigated them to upscale it to a full-out clan war? And how was all of this organized? Here is the story on how the Clan Wars started in Clash Royale. Ever since the beginning of the game, even back in beta in 2016, the Red King and the Blue King have been furiously fighting against each other for no apparent reason, other than their color. And since their very first battle way back in 2016, they have had countless more fights since, likely having fought in more than 1 trillion battles. The Red King and Blue King have been tirelessly fighting out their pointless battle for what seems like forever. So finally, one day in early February 2018, during one of their short maintenance breaks that they were having, right after a hard-fought battle, the Red King and Blue King sat down next to each other and had a quick little chat, something they didn't get to do too often. The Red King said to the Blue King that he couldn't even remember why they were fighting like this. It's not like it was for pride or anything anymore. Curious by that remark, the Blue King replied by saying, "What do you mean not for pride anymore?" Then the Red King further explained, "Well, I mean, I can't even imagine you having any pride left after losing so many times. And I mean, everyone here already knows who the better king is." The Blue King immediately reacted to this and claimed that, yeah, of course everyone knows who the better king is. You're looking at him right now. And being the hot-headed kings that they were, they immediately started to bicker some more until finally the builder came over. He was just visiting from the Clash of Clans village since nothing was happening there for a while. They were still patiently waiting for their own major update back in the village. And then since he heard them arguing, he decided to come over and see what all the fuss was about. So the builder headed over and came in to intervene. He shut them both up and asked them what was going on. They quickly caught him up, and then the builder offered up an easy solution. He told them that they had a similar problem back in the Clash of Clans village between different clans, and they fixed it with something called Clan Wars. At the sound of the word Clan Wars, both kings immediately started nodding their heads and said, yes, that is exactly what we should do. But the builder quickly rained on their parade and told them that Clan Wars from Clash of Clans would never work. It's just way too different to carry over. But the builder did have a different idea. The builder told them to hold on and wait for a bit, and that he'll create a small arena and figure out once and for all whose clan is better, the Red Kings or the Blue Kings. So about 3 months later, near the end of April, the builder came back and told them that their arena was done. And being the competitive characters that they were, they felt obligated to race there and see who was faster. So they raced past the Royal Arena all the way behind it, all the way to the docks, where they boarded a small boat and were taken to what the builder called the War Island. And when the kings saw the War Island for the very first time, saying that they were surprised would be an understatement. They turned to the builder and told him that all they really needed was a small single arena, not one of each arena on its very own island. The builder replied to them by saying that he actually had a lot of time to kill since there was nothing interesting happening in Clash of Clans right now, and he was still waiting for some new buildings or features or something to be added in the future update. So for now, he invested all of his time into creating the War Island, and a replica of each and every single arena. And not only that, he also did create that small new arena, where they could have their very own war battles to see once and for all whose clan was better. And that there is the story on how Clan Wars came into Clash Royale. The Lava Hound is one of the tankiest troops in the game, for Clash of Clans and for Clash Royale. It can destroy bases and take down towers with ease. It can be an unstoppable force. So here is the story of how the Lava Hound came into the world of Clash. Back on September 16th, 2014, a bunch of the Clash of Clans characters had gone over to the Clash Royale arena to help test out the game, as it was still in beta. Once the troops got there, the king split them all into 2 teams. They then began to battle it out inside each arena. They started in the Goblin Stadium and worked their way up, until they got to the P.E.K.K.A.'s Playhouse. P.E.K.K.A.'s Playhouse was a lot different than the other arenas, considering it was built on top of a live volcano. You could even see the lava running through the arena at the middle, and there was nothing but a small bridge to help cross it. Once the battle started, both kings sat back and were banking their elixir. Then the Red King started off by playing a max golem in the very back. The Blue King responded by playing a max level 13 Royal Giant in the opposite lane, following it up with some max Elite Barbarians, two of the most skilled cards in the game. The Red King ignored the Royal Giant and the Elite Barbarians and decided to go all out with his push, so he decided to play his minion horde right behind the Golem. And as they crossed the bridge, the Blue King only had enough elixir to play a tornado, so he used it on top of the minion horde and the Golem. The tornado pulled them back and off the edge of the arena. The Golem and the minion horde got sucked into the volcano, and the minions tried to fly out, but the Golem was falling right on top of them. Both kings were shocked, as the Golem and the minions fell to their deaths. The king had only one option left to save them, but there was no way it would work. As the Golem and minions were falling to their deaths, the Red King had one option left that could save them. But he just used all of his elixir on the Royal Giant and the Elite Barbarians, and he needed 3 elixir to play his tornado spell to maybe pull them back out. But unfortunately he only had 2 elixir left. The elixir bar was filling super slowly and it almost looked like it wasn't moving at all. The Golem and minion horde were seconds away from hitting the molten hot lava in the volcano. And just as the king had enough elixir to play the tornado, the Golem and minions hit the lava and lava splashed everywhere. Then the Golem and the minions both started to sink into the lava. The Red King no longer needed the tornado spell, but then he looks over at his 3 other cards, and at the very end he sees a heal spell. So in a final attempt to save his troops, he plays his heal spell right where the Golem and minions fell. At first, nothing happens, but then after a few seconds, some lava comes spurting up, and then from the abyss of the volcano, a new troop emerges. A glowing red-hot flying Golem. The Golem and the 6 minions must have merged together when the heal spell was played. As the new troops flew out, both the kings and the other troops stared at it in amazement. Then someone in the crowd of troops screamed out, "It's a lava hound." So now every time the lava hound dies in Clash Royale, it spits out the 6 minions that had fallen into the volcano with the Golem. And that there is the story of how the lava hound was brought into the world of Clash. July 29th, 2013. It was another regular day in the Clash of Clans village. Troops were just coming back from a hard day of training and battling, and were heading to the village bar. The bar was run by a group of wizards who were also the village alchemists. As the troops started to pour into the bar, a witch came in behind everyone else, and she seemed to be dragging herself through the door. She sat down in the nearest seat, and then one of the wizards came over to see what she wanted to drink. She replied with, "I'll have the same as always." So the wizard went to go fetch some dark elixir. When he got back, the witch looked even more upset than before, so naturally he asked her what the matter was. She told him that she was having a really hard time fitting in with the rest of the army. They were all super strong like the barbarians, or tanky like the giant, or talented like the wizards, or they have some super special feature like the healer. But there was nothing special about her. She could hardly do any damage, and she didn't have a lot of health either, and she had no special ability as well. The wizard looked at her and then told her to wait here for 1 second. He grabbed her drink of dark elixir and then ran off to the laboratory to grab the rage spell, so that the witch can become bigger, better, faster, and stronger. When the wizard got to the laboratory, he grabbed what he thought was the rage spell and poured it into the witch's dark elixir drink. What he didn't know is that he accidentally grabbed the wrong potion. Without paying too much attention, he grabbed the skeleton spell by accident and mixed it with the witch's drink. So without knowing, he brought the drink back to the witch and she drank it all in one big gulp. Immediately, she felt the spell taking effect. She could feel some new superpower inside of her, and she stood up and raised her staff, and then from the floor emerged 5 skeletons. After this, the witch quickly became one of the coolest troops in the game. She was the only troop at the time that could spawn other troops to fight for her, and a lot of people might have thought that she was the most powerful troop in the game. But that's only because they haven't met her sister yet, the Night Witch. Want to see how the Night Witch came into the world of Clash? Check out Adobo Flash to see the second part of the story and find out how the Night Witch was created. Many years later, when the witch had gone over to the Clash Royale arena when it first opened, she began dueling against all sorts of other troops. She fought against barbarians, minions, and even baby dragons. This was also her first time witnessing all of these different spells in action that the wizards had created. There were fireballs smashing troops, lightning spells frying troops, and huge rockets that crushed just about any troop it could reach. The witch wasn't very powerful in the arena, compared to where she dominated back in the Clash of Clans village. However, she was still a solid troop. Her attack did hardly any damage, and her skeletons were incredibly fragile and died to literally almost anything. So most of the time, players wouldn't even bother bringing her with them into battle. However, one game, a new king who was still very new to the Clash Royale arena decided to bring the witch into battle. During the battle, he was getting absolutely destroyed since his army sort of sucked, and he didn't know what they were doing. And out of rage, the king played every single card he had. So he played the witch and then some bats, and then he spammed every single spell card that he had right on top of her. He dropped a clone, a rage, a zap, and finally a heal spell. This overload of spells started to make the ground smoke, and then both kings were shocked to see some sort of transformation happening through the smoke. The smoke was taking a while to go away, so the king dropped a tornado spell to blow the smoke away. And once the smoke went away, the king saw that the bats had disappeared. But when they looked more closely, they noticed that they didn't actually disappear. They had just merged with the witch. Now, a whole new troop was standing in front of them, the witch combined with the bats. They decided to call her the Night Witch. Now, instead of spawning skeletons, she could summon bats to fight for her. She was so powerful that the Clash of Clans village also wanted to use the Night Witch, so the Clash Royale kings simply cloned her, using the clone spell, then sent her by boat over to the Clash of Clans village. The newest Clash Royale update has brought us 2 awesome new troops, but those troops aren't actually from Clash Royale. The Zappies are from Clash of Clans, and the Hunter might just be from Brawl Stars. So here is the story on how the Zappies and the Hunter came to Clash Royale. Since the summer when the Master Builder's Night Village was discovered by a Hog Rider and a Wizard, the Master Builder has been creating new living contraptions for the arena non-stop. So far he's created the Flying Machine, the Sparky, and now the Sparky's baby brothers, the Zappies. The way that the Zappies were actually created was almost non-intentional. So here's what happened. The Lumberjack from Clash Royale took a boat over to the Night Village in Clash of Clans. Since he had no battles that day, he just wanted to get out and do something. So being the lumberjack that he is, he wanted to go chop some trees down. So what better place to do that than the Clash of Clans forest, where there are trees all over the place, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll even find gems within them. When he got there, he saw the Master Builder hammering away at a building. Turns out the Master Builder's base got destroyed by some gemmer, and so he was repairing the village. The Master Builder was standing over a broken Tesla that was broken into 3 different parts. So he was about to start doing his usual repairs on it, but then right before he could start, the Lumberjack came running over, slipped, and spilled his rage spell on the broken Tesla. The Tesla's broken pieces started to shake and smoke. Then once the smoke went away and the dust settled, 3 tiny creatures emerged. They were 3 mini Teslas that came to life. They rolled around on 4 wheels, and the Lumberjack even thought that they were baby Sparkies. These tiny guys looked super cute, but they were also super deadly. They started rolling around and firing electricity at nearby buildings. They completely destroyed all of the buildings that the builder had just repaired. So obviously the Master Builder got super angry about this since he just spent over an hour repairing all of it. So he told the Lumberjack that this is your fault, so you're dealing with these new zappy thingies. And he told the Lumberjack to get off his island. So he left and took the Zappies with him. Once he got back to the Clash Royale island, the king asked him what these were. The Lumberjack told the king that these little creatures just destroyed an entire Clash of Clans village. So the king seemed pretty impressed about this and raised an eyebrow. He even then decided to put them to the test and use them in the next battle. And it was actually perfect timing, since he could test them against the new troop that just came from Brawl Stars. The other troop, who called himself the Hunter, was the brother of the brawler known as Shelly. But unlike Shelly, he did not have a super ability, so every time they would battle against each other, he would get his butt kicked. And he was obviously tired of losing to his younger sister, and tired of being humiliated. So he wanted to get out of there and go somewhere where he could be one of the best. So he had come to the Clash Royale arena while Shelly stayed back at the Brawl Stars arena. But since Brawl Stars was his home, he wanted to bring something with him, so he decided to bring the Brawl Stars logo with him, and he put it inside one of the new arenas, sort of trying to make the arena a home away from home. And that is the short story on how the Hunter and the Zappies were introduced into Clash Royale. The newest legendary card has just come back from the dead in Clash Royale. The Royal Ghost has come back to haunt the arena. But before the Royal Ghost was a ghost, what was he? And how did he become the ghost? Let's go back in time for a second. Back even before the beta for Clash Royale even came out, there was 3 kings in the arena. There was the Red King, the Blue King, and then the Green King as well. The Red and Blue King never got along from the start. They were always fighting to see who was the stronger king. One day the Green King had had enough of their bickering and decided to put it to an end. He told them to battle it out in an arena with their armies. So both the kings agreed to it because they both wanted to prove that they truly were the strongest. The Green King, who was a humble king, didn't care so much about the title of being the best, so he sat on the sidelines and watched. But the first battle didn't go too well. Both kings were trying to cheat to gain the advantage. So, the Green King stopped the battle and told them that he was going to officiate the match so that he can make sure that none of them cheated. So he went to the middle of the arena and signaled for the battle to start. This time, they both fought fair and it was actually a really close battle. Neither player could get a solid push going, so as double elixir time was starting, both players played a giant in the very back on the same side. They started walking towards each other, and then each player followed up with supporting troops. The Red King played a witch, musketeer, and archers, and the Blue King played a wizard, baby dragon, and a bomber. Both kings were holding onto their rockets, knowing that they were going to get a huge positive elixir trade. The Green King saw both of these big pushes walking towards where he was standing at the bridge, and as the 2 mini armies met at the bridge, both kings set their rockets flying. Each rocket connected, taking out all of the troops except the giants, so that each player mirrored their rocket and sent it in the exact same spot as before. Not only did the rocket take out the troops, but it also took out the Green King as well. All 4 rockets just absolutely smothered the Green King. The quadruple rocket destroyed the bridge and the Green King fell into the water. The small river carried his body downstream, and the river flowed all the way back to the Clash of Clans village. It seemed that neither the Red King nor the Blue King realized what had happened, since they were still so occupied in trying to beat each other. And it is even said that till this day, they are still fighting out their battle to see who is the stronger king. A day later, the Green King's body washed ashore at the Clash of Clans village. The troops immediately realized that he was the king from the Clash Royale arena, so they decided to give him a burial fit for a king. They buried him in his tomb with tons of gold and treasure all around him, and a nice little seat in the very middle where he could be slumped up against. A year later, when the wizards, or also known as the alchemists, had advanced their spells so much that they could now bring troops back from the dead by using the skeleton spell. The skeleton spell was a brand new dark elixir spell that had just been added into the game, and that they had just created using new dark elixir and new methods. So they decided to give this a try on the Green King and see what would happen. So they went and added all of the necessary ingredients and then used the spell on him. But for some reason, it didn't seem to work the way that it had before. But then out of nowhere, the scream of a hog rider began echoing through the Clash of Clans village. The yell was so loud that it forced the wizards to run away, covering their ears. But not only did it get rid of the wizards, but it also was loud enough that it had completed the spell and awoken the Green King. Of course though, he was no longer a Green King. And since he was undead, he was a floating white ghost. So the Royal Ghost then followed the sound of the hog rider's scream and ended up back in the Clash Royale arena. And now seeing his 2 idiotic brothers still fighting once again, he was ready to get revenge on them and haunt the arena forever. The newest card being added to Clash Royale is a mix of 2 bubblegum slinging archers and a weak giant with a wooden sword. A weird and random trio that somehow works together perfectly. Together, the Rascals are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Clash Royale arenas, but before this trio took over the Clash Royale arena, how did they all meet each other? And how did the archers start shooting bubblegum? And why does the giant have a wooden sword? These are just a few of many unanswered questions about the brand new Rascals. So in my attempt to answer all of these questions, here is my Clash Royale origin story for the Rascals. the addition of the new clan wars in Clash Royale, on the new war island, people had noticed a brand new hut that was supposedly belonged to the Rascals. However, our story starts even before that, back when a tiny little baby giant was born. Although this new baby giant was unlike all the other giants, he was about half the size of all the other regular giants his age and seemed to be a little slower mentally, even by a giant standard, as we all already know how smart they can be. His parents quickly realized that he was not like the other giants at all. In fact, not only was he smaller and weaker than the rest of the giants, but he was also kind of weird. He never liked to smash things with his fists like other giants. In fact, he kept insisting that he wanted to wield a sword instead like the knight. But thankfully, his parents didn't trust him holding a sharp sword since he wasn't the brightest of the bunch, so they compromised and gave him a wood sword that he could use instead, just so that he couldn't hurt himself or anyone else that badly. However, the sword wasn't the only thing that separated him from the rest. He also tended to wear all black, sort of like a goth, and then worst of all, he had a gross looking haircut. For the most part, his parents still loved him. They were just hoping for that one day when he would be able to outgrow his phase and join the rest of the regular giants in the arena and battle like the rest of them. But then when the day finally came and he was old enough to join the battle, he hadn't changed at all. His parents kept insisting that he just act normal and drop his wood sword and change his style, but still the giant refused. And in the heat of the moment, the dad giant told him, "Get out of here, you're no son of mine," and he banished his son. Pretty cruel, right? So anyways, the giant ended up leaving, and eventually he ended up coming across an island where he would later meet up with two green-haired slingshot-bearing archers. And let's quickly go back in time once again, because while all of this was happening to the giant, there was two young archers were born around the same time as well. And just like the giant, these two archers were quite different from the rest of their kind. They both had neon green hair, and at some point during their childhood they picked up eye patches. And since then they have never taken them off. These two archers were some of the most competitive sisters out there, competing over absolutely everything. And growing up, when most of the other archers would be practicing with their bow and arrow, these two sisters would pick up their slingshots and use those instead. Their archery instructor didn't agree with it, but she realized that since she couldn't convince them otherwise, the least she could do was provide them with some useless ammo in hopes that they would eventually give up the slingshot and pick up a bow and arrow instead. So obviously the instructor went and got the most obvious type of useless ammo, so she went and grabbed her stash of bubblegum that she just so happened to have on her at all times, and then gave them basically an unlimited amount of bubblegum. But little did the instructor know, the bubblegum, if shot correctly, could actually be quite deadly. And then these two archers ended up mastering the art of slingshotting bubblegum. No one ever understood why they used slingshots, and since it was so different from what everyone else was doing, all the other archers made fun of them and wouldn't quite accept them into their group. Naturally, this made them pretty upset, and since they felt that they didn't belong there, they decided to leave. And after walking and swimming forever, they arrived at a nearby island where they met a giant with a bowl cut. When the giant saw the exhausted archers, he realized that he had to help them, so he took them to his little shack and helped them get back to full strength. He was really glad that he finally had people to talk to, and since they were all away from home, they got along pretty well. The giant sort of acted as the slingshot archers' big brother and protected them at all costs, and the archers continued to be little rascals and use their slingshots on anyone or anything that moved. And it wasn't until the builder built a bunch of new arenas on that island that the rascals finally rediscovered the Clash Royale League. And when they did, instead of entering it as a giant and archers, they decided to stick together as a trio, as a brand new group called the Rascals. The Barbarian Barrel, which is the newest card coming to the Clash Royale arena, is a bit of a combination between the Goblin Barrel, the Log, and the Barbarian. But the real question that even Supercell has is, how did the Barbarian even get in the barrel? So in today's video, I wanted to go over what I think happened to the Barbarian, and also while we are on the topic of the Barbarian Barrel, let's go over how the Goblins got stuck inside of their Goblin Barrel as well. So here is the Goblin Barrel and the Barbarian Barrel's origin story.